Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back here once again, another Friday night, and it's the Friday Night Movie Club episode 98. And we're here talking about a topic of great debate, apparently, because nobody knows exactly what this word mid means. I mean, I figured you guys were up on like Zinger lingo, but apparently not. But we're going to talk about the films of the year that are not great, they're not bad, they're just perfectly in the middle. So this is a fun topic that I wanted to do tonight because obviously we've seen a lot of good movies, we've seen a lot of bad movies. I think we've seen a lot of bad movies, let's be honest. But we can talk about those in weeks to come here. I want to talk about films that we felt like had things that were good, had things that were bad, and pretty much ended up somewhere in the middle of the pack on our rating system. So this is something I will say, like, if we're looking at how we normally rate these movies, this is ratings that I would say that we rated anywhere between a 2.5 to a 2 out of 5 in our rating system here. So I have a little, I think I could pop up here just for a second. So we're going with the Urban Dictionary definition of mid. You're asking, what is the mid movies here? Mid is a word used to describe something that is not good, that is not bad, it is in the middle, hence the term mid. So this is going to be films that, it was so close to being a solid movie, but for whatever reason, it just slipped up. And I have a list of movies that I have here tonight, and also have two guys who have a list of movies that they probably want to talk about themselves here. Good buddy, Mr. Rob Motto is back with us again. How you doing tonight, Rob?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, I don't. This is going to be a little difficult for me because this is like, okay, so how bad is it? Like, how bad is it allowed to be? And then how, because there's going to be some 3-star movies in this list just because.
So one accidentally
or one, just like terrible scores. So
one accidentally stuck up on my list too, and we'll go into detail about how that happened here too. But like I said, I do have a few movies that we can start off here with, and I'll kind of give you a glance of how this night's going to go. And also, our buddy Rick Aragon, who's back inside of his house for the first time in several days. How you doing, Rick?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I had a good Christmas with a lot of tamales, and
you didn't get robbed. So I mean, that was probably the best case scenario.
I didn't get robbed. I didn't get murdered. I didn't get deported. That's actually going to be next month. So, so yeah, I had a pretty good weekend. We actually managed to see about 3 or 4 movies, which is a lot for me. Yeah. So, well, yeah, and none of the ones that I saw are going to make my mid list. They're either going to be like not good, or one will probably be in my 10 best.
Really? So you're not? Is there nothing from this? Well, I mean, then again, it hasn't really been a great week for films. I mean, from what I've seen, the ones that are out right now, you have the Nosferatu movie, which I know Rob saw earlier today. You
Yeah,
were
I saw
kind
it too.
of.
I saw it too.
Well, but to actually just here, Rob, if would you put Nosferatu in a mid list if you had to, because you didn't completely hate it, but you didn't completely love it either.
No, what's funny is the first half of the movie, I was like, okay, I could actually see this being like not, it's not going to be great or anything, but like it's not bad. It's like what, and then it just absolutely just jumps off the deep end. So, no, if any, it's not going to end up on my worst of the year just because there's so many. It's probably going to be a top 25 at this point. And I probably won't be able to share them all on the show or whatever that we do just because there's so many, but it's bad. It's to the point where it's like, okay, I've only seen like maybe 75, 80 movies from this year. So, and the fact that like, I don't know, 40 to 45% of them are on the worst of the year list is pretty damning. It's pretty bad. I mean, look, I'm a harsh critic. I'll be the first to admit that, but it's just been a really bad year.
Hey, I congratulate you, Rob, for being able to even see Nosferatu. I couldn't. I mean, I was at a theater and I went to a screening, and I was like, "Is there something wrong with the screen?" Because I have such a hard time actually seeing anything that is on the screen, even in scenes that are in the daytime. Few that there were, it was like I can't see.
Imagine wearing those 3D glasses. I'll try to imagine.
And then the one interior, it's bright. The light from outside is so bright, it's blinding to the point where it's like, okay, what the fuck are you doing? Like, I know it's a weird like fixation. He shoots it like it's a black and white, like silent 1920s era movie, and
Like
it's
the
like,
first
if you want to do that, just do that. Don't do this like, oh, it's color grading and it's, you know what I mean, and it's like, okay, it's fine. There's some really nice moments, like when Nicholas Hoult is, before he gets into the carriage with the snow falling and the floor, like, yeah, okay, there's some of that, but it's only effective up to a certain point. And like Rick said, it's hard to make out what's even in a scene because the lighting is so fucking dark. It's like dark blue on top of black is how I would describe it. But yeah, it's
No, I
just
mean,
muddled
I
movie
know
all over.
what they were going for. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna put my review. I know what they were going for, but
Okay,
it
let me
doesn't
just say
mean that
this
it
real quick.
actually worked.
It might be a small spoiler. Why the fuck does Count Orlok have a mustache? Like, it looks so fucking ridiculous. It looks like Robotnik as a vampire or something. And I'm just like, that's supposed to be Bill Skarsgård. And I feel so bad for him because it's like, it's just some animatronic voice that is being done. And, you can only understand 40% of his dialogue because there's this rough Romanian accent that he's speaking in. And it's like, there's no subtitles. You're just like, okay, I've seen Nosferatu before, so I can kind of piece together what's happening.
If that's what you think, the screening I went to, which was the very first screening at 10 a.m., no, that one was a subtitled one, which I was not aware of. So I got to read everything, and I
Okay.
was able to understand everything. I didn't even notice I didn't notice the mustache because I couldn't see it. I couldn't see much of anything in this film. I just kept I just kept thinking, why can't I see anything? It was so hard to see. So I didn't even see the mustache. And as for the voice, I've been told that that was his actual voice and that he got opera training to lower it and to adjust it and make it more. And I was like, why couldn't they just manipulate it with, electronically? I'm sure that would have been easier for him. I don't know why they need to go all that. So like, no, it's not. But it's not going to be on my mid list because there are films that are like, I mean, it wasn't. Again, I know what they were going for, but it was not working.
Okay, but in the second half of the movie, all of the melodramatic, like over the top, she's possessed. She's Linda Blair in The Exorcist. It was just like, okay, really, we're going here. First of all, it had like in the direction he took the Dracula character or Count Orlok character, where it's like, okay, you're just doing your own fucking thing now, and it's not even interesting. It has nothing to do with Nosferatu. And it just makes me angry the more I'm watching it, as it goes on. But anyway.
Yeah, but the thing is that both versions that have come out before, and God help anyone who thinks that this is the first version, the silent version and the Werner Herzog remake are both better films.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know why we even needed this one. What did he bring to the table? Nothing. I was not. I would sooner go and watch the original, which is a silent film, and I would watch the Werner Herzog remake, because that one was very stylized, but that was the whole point. And more importantly, you could actually see Klaus Kinski on screen. You didn't have to like wonder what's going on, what's going on, who's there. It's like, but bless them, it gave them a chance. The acting was not theatrical, but it was very melodramatic, so it gave everyone a chance to be kind of like, almost.
There were people laughing like throughout,
There
like
were.
just at the delivery, and sometimes it was just the lines. Willem Dafoe was actually, got to ham it up a little bit, but
What movie is Willem Dafoe not in 2024? It seems like he's in everything.
He wasn't in Argyle.
Okay, one. Well, look, so this is actually kind of the pace that I want to set for tonight, because a lot of these films are going to have pretty good debate, because we're talking about what's good and what's bad with them. So let me use this as an example here of our theme here for tonight. And this is not officially on my top 10 list, but I guess I had an honorable mention, because I always do a few honorable mentions, only because I see 107 films every single year. This probably would be an honorable mention movie for the mid list, and my first pick for my mid list this year will be Aliens Romulus. So the thing about this film, and this is my biggest complaint here, stylistically wise, I think it's a pretty good film. I think that they put a lot of effort into recreating like a lot of the scenery here. My biggest tick with this movie is that it feels like it's just one giant member berry for a movie that came out 40 years ago, and it's like everything about this film is pointing us back to another movie, which I guess is great for people who are fans of the Aliens franchise, even though at this point have they only been like what, two good films since this point, all the ones that have come out since the first one. But if you're going that far for the member berries and nostalgia pops and all this other stuff, you might as well just go watch the older movies. That's really what it feels like. I mean, the acting in this film is not bad. Like, none of the actors here are like terrible, or just feel like, oh, they just. The acting's actually pretty good. The use of the visual effects, the VHS actually does a pretty good job of recreating the de facto villain here. Obviously, a little bit of AI was used in this movie as well, literally bringing dead actors back from to life. That's a whole other conversation we can get into as well. And it feels like, man, this movie had the potential of doing a lot more world building, a lot more kind of a reset of the whole thing. It's like, here we have a new cast of characters, a new direction. We could probably a new franchise if you guys set up a story that was interesting enough to do so. But I don't think they focus on any of that aspect of it. So it's just a movie that looks really nice. It looks like Aliens. You have characters around here that could be an Aliens movie, but at the same time, it's like, I just got my takeaway from this movie is that I might as well just go watch the first two Aliens movies, and I have a much better time than whatever they were trying to do here. They didn't even bother to really put together a solid story here. It's like it's a lot of social commentary on capitalism, some DEI representatives, nostalgia bait, but outside of that, like, what really do you have here? So that was my biggest knock on it. My original rating was a 2.5 out of 5. Some good things about it, but also some things that just simply didn't work for me. So this would be one of my honorable mentions here on the mid list. Would you agree with this, or would you have disagreements with Aliens being on this list?
Well, I hated it. I gave it a 1.5 out of 5. So,
Mhm.
this is closer to more worst of the year list. But again, it's in good company. But there are just some egregious things like bringing Ian Holm back from the, not even
Literally from the
using his
dead.
image to do this character. And it's like, whatever, I get it. Some connective tissue to the Alien franchise. I know why they did it storytelling wise, but the floating, acid in Zero Gravity, the Ellen Ripley callback, just, what was it? Get away from her, you bitch.
Yeah,
Where
the
They
the
didn't
literal
actually. They
line from
didn't
the
actually
movie.
say that, did they?
the characters who were mean to the black android got, and then ended up dying. You know what I mean? It was just kind of like, okay, whatever. I like Kaylee Spaney, who's in one of my favorite movies of the year, Civil War, but I thought she was really not used well here. But it could have been a lot. I say this, it could have been a lot worse because Alien franchise has not done well. Past Aliens. I have a soft spot for the assembly cut of Alien 3, but even that, it's still have to say it's a flawed movie, even at the best form it's in. So the franchise hasn't done well. This one, I think, did really well at the box office. So maybe that means better movies can be made in the future. But the cynical part of me says no. but no, I know a lot of people did like it, even if I found it ultimately disappointing.
I did not see it. I have not seen an Aliens movie since Prometheus, and I've only seen Prometheus, Alien, and Aliens. Alien and Aliens, I think, are two of the best science fiction films made. I hated Prometheus, so I really have no invested interest in this. I'm just fascinated by the thought that Ian Holm is back from the dead in the way that they brought Spengler.
Ash.
Yeah, well, they brought Spengler back in the Ghostbusters movie, and someone being mean to black androids. I guess people are so racist that they are racist against robots now. I'm just, and that they didn't actually say "get away from her, you bitch," did they? I mean,
No, that was they literally
no, they did.
They did. That's sad. That is sad.
They did that thing that they do in Beetlejuice that they do in a lot of movies that there are like, hey, you remember this from 40 years ago?
That's just.
Yeah, I mean, but most movies will make a reference to the line. They won't actually repeat the line verbatim, and that's exactly what they did in this film. And that was an audible groan moment, definitely in this movie.
Yeah, if I had seen that, I might have just thrown something at the screen. Just like,
I wanted to.
Come on.
A box of popcorn. And then again, you can't really throw anything at the screen. But the whole novelty of throwing things at the screen is like you could throw like a $2 like box of candy like at the screen. But now that thing's like $7, like you're not throwing that at the screen. As much money as I spend on that.
I could throw this. I could throw this whole massive cherry Coke Zero only because I got it free because I used my it was my birthday gift that they send you every year. So
Yep,
I have a large parking. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Regal does the same thing. I don't know if that was AMC or who
that was AMC. That was AMC. So but the bad thing is that I had to go to the one AMC theater, which is a good almost half hour away from my house, and it's in what I consider the ghetto. But for a large popcorn, which I'm not going to eat all by myself, my cousin will help me out. So there's that. But yeah, that was
fat cousin more than meets the eye. Fat cousin.
Oh no, he's actually well, he's a little. He weighs more, but he's taller than I am. But then most people are taller than I am. So
call him the disposal. But no, that's. And yeah, so that's a movie that I will definitely throw on there. It's an honorable mention. We'll get into more depth of some of these films here later on. And then another film, just a quick little sidebar. This is more of a side rant for me because I know you guys haven't seen this movie, but this is something I would definitely put on there. It's a little film called Escape. It was a South Korean film that came out earlier this year. And here's the fundamental problem with this movie is that it's telling two stories at the same time, except one is actually good and one is actually shit. And it's all put together in the same movie. So at the core of the movie is about this guy right here who's a North Korean soldier who on this day he's looking the way to basically escape from North Korea and defect to the South Korean border. Now he has to get there, of course. So his plan was to essentially escape at night and leave the compound so that by the time everyone wakes up in the morning, he's already gone. They can't catch him, right? That was his whole plan. The day that he decides to go up there, somebody else happens to try to escape at the exact same time, and that person gets caught. So now he has to go back and pretend like he wasn't trying to escape, because now he has to explain why he was out there with the guy who was also escaping before any of the sirens and the warnings went off, right? So it kind of like blew his cover. And now his whole thing is that he's trying to help this guy who was trying to escape also escape with him without letting the entire country of North Korea know. That's a pretty compelling story, especially for like a thriller. Actually, really, really good. The problem is that as they're telling this story, they're also telling the story of this guy who's the guy in the car. He's the high-ranking North Korean officer who's like super suspicious of him and basically is like his nemesis throughout the entire film. When it comes to this guy, they decide to tell another side story that really doesn't have anything to do with the film at all. I mean, at least the core story of the film. It's about him constantly on the phone. Now you think he's on the phone with his higher ups at the North Korean compound, whether it's Kim Jong, whoever the case he's taking orders from. You think he's with talking to him the whole time. Turns out that this guy has a secret gay lover in Russia who he has been opining about the entire freaking movie, and it comes out like halfway in that I guess they went to some like pianist school while they were in Russia, and that's where they fell in love. And he's having this whole like drama about oh, I can't get back to him, we can't be together anymore. It's like we're talking about a story where someone's literally getting shot at trying to flee North Korea. You think anyone cares about your gay love story here? But we spend almost equal amount of time on this part of the story as we do with the other one. So it's like every time you just see him on the screen, it's like you audibly groan, and then you go back, it's like, okay, God, now I can get back to the actual story. And then it somehow ends up with him, the guy escaping, getting shot multiple times right at the I guess the borderline of the South Korean border. The guards show up and they're like, hey, this is the DMZ zone, you can't kill anyone out here. And this dude just runs away like a Hanna-Barbera cartoon. That's literally the end of the movie. I'm just sitting here like, who put this film together? Like who really put this film together? Because there's so much to like about the actual core story that they threw in all of this other crap that does nothing but take away from the film. It's like, dude, do you guys need an editor? Do you guys need to fire someone? Like, how can you put together something that had the potential of being so good, it ended up just being complete and utter disaster? Yes, it's quite literally gay ops. It's quite like literally gay ops in this film. I don't know what to say about this movie. Now, I know you guys haven't seen it, but that's probably the best skim that I can go through here. But yeah, so these are the type of movies that I'm talking about here. It's like you had something and then you kind of blew it and you just trampled over it. And then you ended up in the middle of the pack to the point where I don't even remember I actually saw this movie until I look back at my movie lens ratings and be like, oh yeah, I did give this one a 2.5 out of 5 earlier this year. I forgot all about that movie.
Well, I guess even in Korean action films, you need a little representation.
Yeah, and I'm starting to see a little bit more representation in South Korean films, and I'm starting going, oh God, it's spreading.
You think that's why they tried to have that martial law, and they tried
that coup that lasted for like 2 hours?
Yeah, that was the reason. They were like, no, we can't have.
That has to be the first coup I've ever seen where no one actively participated in it at all. There's like, no, we're not doing this. We're not doing this.
No, that's going to interrupt our Korean soap operas. So we need to get back to our regular programming instead of having coups.
Yeah, so there we go. So, Rob, I'll start this one off of you. I don't know how many movies you have on your list here, but let's discuss the first film that you would put on the mid list for 2024. What will be the one you would throw on there?
Yeah, I would throw Reagan on there, which, depending on your political point of view, maybe this is one of the worst movies of the year. I know a lot of people who are Hollywood critics have said that, or at least a few of them. I don't think it's anywhere near the worst movie of the year. I do think it's very favorable to its title character.
It's very log cabin Republican
president he was. Maybe Rick can help me out there, but
I'm sorry, what?
No. I was just curious what number what number President Reagan was, but
he was 40th.
40th. Okay, so and it kind of deals with his he acting in B movies and sort of dealing with what was it, the Red Scare, dealing with the blacklist in Hollywood, and he was very much on the side of we need to get communists out of Hollywood. It's kind of a pernicious issue, and it creates issues for his career. So and shows him meeting his wife, and it's fine. But it's very sort of standard biopic material. I think Dennis Quaid actually gives a good performance. It's hard to do that. It's hard to give a performance that's genuine, that doesn't feel like an imitation or an impression. So I do think he did a good job. I know, what is it? Penelope Ann Miller.
Penelope Ann Miller as
Nancy. Okay. Who played Nancy Reagan. I thought did a really good job. I mean, I haven't seen her do much in the last couple of years, but I thought she was good. But yeah, the movie is just a little bit too flowery. It's a bit too bloated. But and it also has like the cast of like a Fox News TV special.
Yeah.
So Robert Davi and like a lot of very familiar
Oh,
A
faces.
couple,
you
a
missed.
couple of actresses probably, career in Hollywood is done, so they go, okay, I can go do Reagan now because
Right.
that's all I have
And
left.
also I found it weird that it was told from the perspective of like his Russian enemy, played by John
Yeah,
Voight, who's had a wild year. John Voight, that and his role in was it Megalopolis?
Metalopolis. Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
so
well, 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 his
just
Russian
an
accent.
uneven movie overall. I think I gave it a 2.5 out of 5 because again I thought that there was some decent efforts in it. It's just overall uneven.
yeah. I will say this: a couple things to add on to that. The film is from Sean McNamara, who is weird because like he's primarily known for doing like a lot of like old like Disney Channel stuff from like the 2000s, but he also has done a lot of I guess recent films like small budget type stuff too. I didn't for this film. I rated it a little bit higher. I think I gave it a 3 out of 5. But you can definitely tell with like the theme of the movie that it's definitely more log cabin Republican view of Ronald Reagan. It certainly omits a few troubling aspects of his presidency. The whole Iran Contra deal is one that's always lobbied on Reagan and kind of like omits that. It gives a little credence to the point that no, hey, Reagan mentally wasn't at his best towards the end of his life. It kind of like sweep. So there's definitely some things that they purposely like leave out because they want to protect the legacy of Reagan. Because let's be honest, the modern day Republican Party is still views himself as a party of Reagan and not the party of Trump. So that there are some things to that as well. I think that for what's his name, Dennis Quaid, that he did as good of a job as I've seen him over the last couple of years. I think we're more used to him being like so corny and cartoonish and over the top in the last couple of years of his career. But for the obviously the role of Reagan, there was a little more tact to his performance. And I think that was pretty good. I don't really disagree too much with where that one lines up here. I was only slightly higher than you as far as that one goes. But yeah, you can definitely tell this was one of those movies that specifically made to be marketed on like Fox News or Patriot Radio or something like that. You know what I mean?
Well,
Uh,
I'm a little more lenient. I had it pretty high up for a while. I think it was because Penelope Ann Miller really impressed me as Nancy Reagan. She was not the stereotypical Nancy Reagan who was this kind of shrew Lady Macbeth, almost satanically evil figure. She was a flawed woman, but when she was at the hospital after the assassination attempt, that scene actually got to me. I mean, that actually moved me, and it was a credit to her performance. And I appreciated it a little more. There were things that I didn't like. I didn't understand that whole Russian thing. It was like, why do you need this? I thought, okay, maybe you could have a class like a class that explained why the communism fell, why you needed this specific person to have narrate this whole story, like they were studying him from when he was a Hollywood star. And I should point out that when he was making movies, he was a New Deal Democrat. It was not that he was
yep.
some sort of conservative. It wasn't until like the 60s when he started shifting to the right. So that was a strange decision for them to have made. And then I was kind of puzzled that they had Pat Boone the character, and then they had Pat Boone the real person in the same scene, and I was like, okay, I'm not quite following this. But one thing that I thought they
Because
did,
it's like, can we really swing
yeah,
this
but
to where
yeah,
he's playing his younger self?
yeah,
And
but
it
he
would
wasn't, but
probably
he
be
wasn't,
more.
yeah, but he wasn't, yeah, but he was Pat Boone, the older Pat Boone was playing a different person. It was strange. I think it was a mistake to try to cover the whole of his life in this movie. It's, I mean,
Mhm.
he lived into his 90s. It's a massive life with a lot of things, and versus a complete unknown, which Rob and I both saw. That one just covered a small section of Dylan's life. So we didn't need all of this. I wish they had focused just on one aspect of Reagan. But yeah, I think this will probably be the type of movie that conservatives would enjoy and liberals would hate. But it is based more on the actual reaction to Reagan, the person, versus
Yeah.
Reagan, the film. But I am very complimentary toward Penelope Ann Miller. I will submit her name, even though she has no chance to get any award recognition. I will submit her name as one of my nominees for Best Actress, simply because I thought she did a good job as the character. Whatever you think of her as a person, I thought she did a good job in the film. as a performance. So yeah, I like this movie probably a little more than you guys, but I'm probably with Jacob. I probably would have given it a 3. I think I gave it a 3.
Fair enough. Rick, what is a movie that you would like to talk about on being on your mid list?
All right. Well, the first one that I have here, I have quite a few, but I'm gonna cut down some. I'm gonna cut some out. The first one is "Am I Racist?" The Matt Walsh documentary. I thought, oh well, it has an interesting topic, and when you remove Matt Walsh from the actual point of discussion, it's actually interesting and it actually works. I think some of the best parts were when he's not there or when he lets other people talk. My problem is that he stayed in character, quote unquote, so much, and he made the movie more about how funny he thinks he is, that it took away any good points that he had about the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. There is a great moment in the movie where he's talking to an older black man from I think British Guyana, and the older man, he's still doing his shtick. Matt Walsh is still doing some sort of shtick where he's like this sort of hippy drippy lefty. But the older man, he's just very respectful, and he's like telling him, "No, I've never experienced any overt racism and all this. No, I don't know. I don't know who any of these people are. The white fragility writer, and I actually, I have some Bibles, and I that's the only book I read. And here, would you like one?" Those were good moments. Now, this part here, where they're at the dinner, I thought this would have worked had not Walsh decided to insert himself and try to show how funny he is. Because at one point you do hear the dishes crashing after they say something like, all Republicans are Nazis or something like that. He decides to insert himself, and then he keeps popping in his little costume and like interrupting this meal, which is just for women, and he keeps like trying to toast, to oppression, or I mean to anti-oppression or whatever. He made himself the focus. It takes away from anything good that could pop up in what he's trying to cover. When he's not doing his shtick, it works. I mean, when he's not doing it, it works. When he is becoming the focus, it doesn't work. That's why it was like, I mean, it's barely passable, but it's, it could have been so much better if he had just dropped his whole shtick to show how funny he thinks he is. Over and over, I'm just like, get off the screen, get off the screen, and focus on whatever you're trying to tell. So that's why it's like somewhere in the middle. Yeah, that one part where where they do this shtick, they want to have a petition to rename the George Washington Monument the George Floyd Monument. And you see all these people signing it. That could have been funny if not for Walsh trying to insert himself and say, "Oh, how funny I am." He's not funny. So that's why it's like mid. It's like, I think I gave it a 2.5. Like barely passable, but could have been so much better. Could have been so much better.
So I'm glad you guys do have some movies on your list here to talk about here. I'm gonna swing back over to Rob here because Rob, I want you to go over your list and then go over your full list and we'll discuss it here. Then we'll go with Rick and then I can cap it off of a list of my own. So, Rob, what else do you have on your mid list for 2024?
Sure. So I've got Rebel Ridge. I don't know if you guys saw that Netflix movie, which is like kind of deals with asset forfeiture and corrupt police force, but of course the hero, the protagonist, is a black man, so it has that sort of specter of race.
Well, I mean, it's Netflix, so I mean,
well, here's the thing. I actually like the writer director Jeremy Saulnier because he's done movies that are really good, like Green Room, about that like neo-Nazi gang in Portland, Oregon, Blue Ruin, even this movie Hold the Dark, which was like his first Netflix original release that he did, was pretty good. But yeah, this one just it starts out good. It's a good premise. It's an interesting thriller, but it becomes too much of the commentary on police brutality and the criminal justice system, and it gets weighed down by it in the second half. And it's like, I'm right there. I don't care that the protagonist is black. Just he's a guy who's having his rights infringed, who has a experience with, he's like this Army Ranger, specially trained. Like, that's a cool idea for a movie. Like, let's see how that plays out. But no, it has to like revel in this in all these talking points in victimization and all that, and so it just becomes like a disappointing, predictable social messaging movie. And it's ultimately was disappointing for me, but I think, yeah, I mean, I gave it a 2.5 out of 5. So again, it's not terrible. Again, I think it has a decent start, but just kind of loses steam and goes into some pretty predictable places.
Unfortunately, a lot of films take that route.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but yeah, they said it's Netflix, so those things don't surprise me. I see that with most Netflix movies.
Right, there could be a double feature with the 6888 or whatever that is.
And then so Trap was another one with M. Night Shyamalan's movie, which again, not a perfect movie, but I had a lot of fun watching it. Maybe it was that I went to see with my mom. I don't know, but we both enjoyed it. I think you have the ridiculous part where his daughter, the pop star, like literally steals Josh Hartnett's phone, or it's like, and prevents him from getting out of that bathroom or whatever. And it's like, okay, that part just is a little kind of ridiculous.
I will say this just real quick too. I like this. I gave it a stronger. I think it was like either 3 or 3.5. But had the third act not dragged on as long as it did, and especially everything with her, I probably would have given it a much higher rating. But yeah, the third act definitely was a little too much. It's like, look, I get it. You want to put your daughter over, but like this is not the point to put her over. You had her fine when she was just on stage being the pop star. It's like, don't try to make her the actress too. It's like that's not her role.
Yeah, that was, she gave a pretty terrible performance, and this whole concept that, oh, this is a revelation from Josh Hartnett, this is something we've never seen him before. I'm going, well, it's not particularly good. It's actually, at the end, the third act is actually found it rather funny at times. So I was not impressed with this movie. I mean, this is probably mid, but the fact that the third act really killed it for me, which is why I probably gave it like a 2 out of 5. It didn't quite make my mid list, but this is not what I would disagree with.
Yeah, what else were you going to say about this movie?
Oh no, I wasn't going to say anything. I was gonna just kind of continue with my list, but I like Josh Hartnett's performance actually. Sort of this contained mania for most of the film before he just completely goes nuts. But no, yeah, like the shot where it just has him taking off his shirt, where there's no reason for him to do that. Like there's stuff
you
like
need the obligatory shirtless shot. So
you also have, like I said, the third act where they're both in a car in the middle of a busy street. They're like, everyone can see them. Somehow he manages to not only slip out of the car when everyone has like cell phones and cameras all over the car, but he also manages to get a police uniform and like sneak away. It's like, how did this happen and nobody saw it? Like this is what happens when you try to make a villain a little too cunning and like a little too like dude, people get caught like at grocery stores making mistakes. Like you don't have to make him like a super villain at that point. You know what I mean?
I know this is a strange thing to focus on, but I was like, why did the concert end in the afternoon? It's like, they're leaving and it's the daytime, and I'm thinking, the concerts that I've been to, I don't think I've been to one where it's like 3, 4 in the afternoon and the show's over. I get hung up on details like that.
You know why? It probably has to do with shooting. Like that arena was probably only available, and you know what I mean. There's something along those lines, and they just conveniently don't ever mention it. Like, oh hey, why is this in the afternoon?
So I think it was a little overrated by so many people who are like, oh, this is thrilling and it's such wild twists and turns. I'm like, no, I just got hung up on really strange details. But once they left the concert, I think the film just kind of it lost all momentum, and it's like, no. And
well, I mean, it lost its sense of a story, because the whole story is that how is this guy gonna get out of this concert with all the security and like the feds and everyone out on him, and then once he gets out, it's kind of like, well, then where's the story go from there? Because you kind of blew the payoff. So
yeah, I mean, he managed to escape Haley Mills, so I mean, how's that possible?
But what you have really, and you don't know it obviously, before it gets revealed, but you're being led back to why why they're even looking for him in the first place. Because that was, I mean, really, it's just like you set up the premise, but then you kind of circle back to, oh yeah, his wife is terrified of him and has secret, secret he
You,
told the police and whatever.
what really got me to think less of this film is when she goes into the bathroom and she's contacting all her fans to find this house and all this, and I'm thinking they used pretty much that same plot in the Annie remake with Quasenel.
The Black
I can't
Annie.
remember. Yes, the Black
Yeah.
Annie. They use the same thing. Like when she's kidnapped, she is still on like Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and updating her fans on where she's at. And I'm thinking, did they really steal that plot point from Annie, the remake? It's like, geez, it's bad when you have flashbacks to Annie in a horror thriller. All right, there's just something wrong with that, in my view.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right,
What's the next
Rob,
movie?
yeah.
So I got The Apprentice. I know that Rick saw this. I don't know if you did, Jacob, but
Nah, I didn't catch it.
so this was not a okay, overall, this is not a bad movie. It's about Donald Trump and his, rise to where he is now, I guess, but as Rick was saying, it's a portion of a guy's life. It's not his entire life. But it's not like it's a pretty good performance by Sebastian Stan playing Donald Trump. He doesn't do that thing that Alec Baldwin does where he hates the guy and he's
terrible.
playing him that way. He's playing him with empathy. He's playing him as a real character, a real human being. And the movie where the movie falters is it doesn't have a clear narrative in the sense that the things it presents about Donald Trump are like they're true about your average businessman that reaches that kind of level of success. Where it's like, okay, so he cheats on his first wife he's sleeping with what is it, Ivanka? I don't Ivana. While she's like engaged to this guy. Okay, so he's a bad guy and he, cuts off Roger Stone.
No.
Yeah.
Sorry,
not Roger Stone. It's
get them confused.
Cohen.
Roy Cohn.
Roy
Yeah,
Cohen.
so
Roy Cohen.
when he gets really sick and has AIDS, even though he's like the reason, he has his success according to the movie. So, I mean, there's these things about it that they're saying, oh, this isn't a good guy. It's like, okay, like that's it. That's the really disappointing part. And then Jeremy Strong, who plays Roy Cohn, is very good. He really commits himself to that role, that performance. If the movie was better, I think he might actually be in line for like,
Supporting
Academy
actor.
Award nomination, Best Supporting Actor. But it's just not going to be that movie's year. But it didn't do well. Nobody went to see it. So, but again, the movie just kind of falls apart on its own. But yeah, there's some things that it captures that time period really well. Again, I think the performances are good, but it's just kind of an incomplete movie, and you wonder like, why was this made? Because it's like half of an idea, it just doesn't completely come to fruition. But the people who hate Trump will be like, oh, it's this is who he's been all along. It's like, okay, it's about a business guy in New York in the 1980s, a decade where a lot of people made a lot of money.
Well, actually, I would have said that the first half was surprisingly sympathetic towards the Donald because you got to see when he's trying to collect rent and you get to see people attack him, like literally throw boiling water at him, I think, at one point. And he seems to be very naive and unaware of like the decadence that goes on in Roy Cohn's parties. And to his credit, Trump, I think, is a teetotaler. I don't think he's ever drunk, and you do get to see how his brother's alcoholism shaped his view of drinking. Like he didn't want that. So the first half is actually quite good, and Jeremy Strong really is exceptional as Roy Cohn. I mean, he is just this overwhelming force of evil, but shrewd and determined to just crush any on all opposition. And so that part worked. And I always say this when I talk about The Apprentice. It's not until they get to Blue Monday and you get to hear that dun 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 dun, dun, dun and my friends and I always say, you know, it's the 80s when you hear Blue Monday playing. So once we get to that part, it becomes something else. It becomes like the stereotypical idea of Trump as this satanic force who's going to basically murder people. There's that controversial scene where it's alleged that he raped Ivana. Now she's dead. She cannot say whether that happened, and it's doubtful. And I don't think he's ever gotten like liposuction or hair plugs, which the movie says that he has. I don't think so. I think that is his natural hair, as awful as it is. So it's worked up until we got to the 1980s, and then the second half just becomes this almost diatribe. But it is a mid movie, and I will submit Jeremy Strong to my list for supporting actor. And Stan, in another world, might have had a better shot, but surprisingly enough, that's also on my list for mid movies. So we
His
can knock
big
that out.
crime in this movie, by the way, is liking cheese balls. There's this scene where he just keeps stuffing cheese. It's right there on the screen, by the way, where he's just stuffing cheese balls in his mouth.
That's at the opening of the Trump Tower, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And yeah, and we got to see Fred and was it Mary Trump, like the mother and the father and the father's dementia. Maybe it wasn't terrible, at least the first half. The second half,
Right.
though, I did learn that Roger Stone was Roy Cohn's pool boy, which is already a very creepy idea. I mean, just the whole image of that is just, ugh, I don't want to see that.
Yeah.
Yep. So what's next on your list?
I have Horizon, the Kevin Costner Western. This was some movie I looked forward to really up until it came out. It just is an uneven and kind of incomplete mess. We don't know if we're ever even going to get the conclusion to it. They've shot part 2, which I'm still waiting to come to streaming or get released into theaters. And then who knows about parts 3 and 4. So there's some really nice aspects to it in terms of filmmaking, in terms of classic Western framing, composition, and that visual storytelling. But this is like the worst thing to release for modern audiences at the movies. It's just like, sure, you're going to get some boomers and Gen Xers who love Westerns, so will go out to see it, and it's not going to make much money. So I'm glad that he was willing to kind of risk his own money for this, because I don't know that Warner Brothers really would have agreed to it otherwise. But it's on Max now, and you can check it out. And if you love Westerns, I definitely would recommend it. I think that especially for those that are fans of like the John Ford traditional Western will appreciate it. But it just
it's one of those films where it's like
these type of movie that would be better suited on streaming instead of seeing in a theater.
Or as
this whole idea.
series.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. This whole idea would have been far better as like a mini series, or maybe just like a one-off series on, like, say, Paramount or something like that. This format doesn't work well for cinematic theater. Like it just doesn't. Because I mean, you're talking about committing to a 3-hour film, which basically nobody did, which is why the second one didn't come out. And I don't think we're even going to get the third one that was going to be planned here. It's like if they just did like a 10-episode like short series or something like around those lines, or like a mini series where it's more digestible and you can like tell a bigger story. You don't have to worry about it like grinding on in a cinematic format. I think it would have played up a lot better. I just don't think the format worked for it. I think there was way too many ideas. Like I said, somebody should have reeled Costner in, but when so much of his own money tied into this whole thing, I can understand, why they couldn't. All I have to say is this is a perfect representation of don't quit your day job there, Kevin. And
Well, I mean, I would have just said that he could have just concentrated on making one, just Horizon, and if he thought there would be more, he could have left it open for at least a part 2. But you can't plan out a 4 epic film series and make it 2.5 or 3 hours long for each of them and expect the audience to follow or to have enough interest to watch each story. That's why I don't like franchises, because one of the things that they have is that they expect you to follow it even after you reject the first one. So this was a mistake, and I really think he should have just said, you know what, maybe we'll just, instead of making it into a feature film, we'll release it as a mini series, or as like maybe a new, or no, something different than, was it Yellowstone, so he could do that and focus. And if the audience drew to it, maybe he could cobble it into a release for parts 3 or 4, instead of just saying, okay, we're going to have this 4 film series, in a western, an original story, no one's really knows anything about it, and expect the audience to follow him. And besides, I, not to sound harsh, but I don't think he has the drawing power anymore to have people flock to a Kevin Costner film,
You
not
know
like he
that
did.
you know that El Dorado came out like 8 years after Rio Bravo.
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, and so I mean, and I'm just talking. Howard Hawks was very good at giving audiences what they wanted, and then duplicating it over and over and over again. He really was the Steven Spielberg of his time. And I just think about that in terms of the Western, where it's like it has to be a self-contained 2 hour and 20 minute, as Rio Bravo's kind of long, you know, movie about with characters that you connect with and want to see again and again and again. And as much as I like the attempt and the effort by Kevin Costner, um, it it doesn't have that. You don't connect. This is not a memorable movie where you're like, I really need to see the conclusion to this story.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
we all know why this happened, because he did not like where Taylor Sheridan was taking Yellowstone and his character, so he threw a hissy fit and quit and did all that. And then, in the middle of that, his like wife asked for a divorce. And and so he's just like, he's literally trying to like turn, pivot and do his own thing. And it's a complete flop.
He's
So,
borderline crashing out right now. That's
yeah.
basically like where.
oh, that's terrible. That's terrible. And I would just say that he can make long films. I mean, long westerns. Dances with Wolves is a very long film, and it's still,
Especially the director's cut.
yeah, it's still well thought of. I don't think it's. I think I would have made Dances with Wolves a mid film, and I would have picked Goodfellas. But maybe he just thought, go back to the western again, and maybe I'll have more success like I have in the past, and I was going to the well once too often.
Yeah.
Yep. What you got next?
All right, Megalopolis made my list. As much as I appreciate the effort and the attempt by Francis Ford Coppola, this really was a movie that he just decided, I don't care. This is not commercial. Nobody's gonna go see it. I don't care. I'm making it anyway. And so I appreciate, I respect that. And plus, there's a lot of entertaining stuff in it. Okay, like the stuff Aubrey Plaza says, like the Shia LaBeouf being over the top and ridiculous, Adam Driver spouting off in this kind of pretentious, elitist sort of way. The issues of the movie where like Francis Ford Coppola sees the future as utopian, even it's like, okay, but it's from a completely like elitist perspective. So just work on that, buddy, Mr. Artist. It's visually dynamic and interesting, but also like, what the fuck are you doing? Half the time. So it is a movie for movie lovers and for people who like just want to see something insane and wacky and creative, but that doesn't necessarily provide a cathartic wrap up and neat little bow at the end. So there are things I like about it. There are things that are definitely cringy and just like, but there, we'll always have go back to the club.
We got
So
back to the club. I'm sorry. That's how I would have said it. I was like, I would have said it exactly the same way. I liked Megalopolis a lot more than most everyone. Spoiler alert: it will appear on another one of my lists, but I'll let you guess which one that is. I will say that I admire the ambition. I admire the visuals. I actually thought well of some of the performances, but yeah, there are some things that are just so bizarre. Like all of Dustin Hoffman. I mean, why was he even in this movie? What role did he have? I did not understand any of it. I think this type of movie that made sense in his mind, but not in anyone else's mind. So I appreciated that he was trying to compare ancient Rome with, I guess, New York, and trying to have like the decadent world. So there were things that I
You
really
know,
loved about it, but there were things that I'm like, what is this? I
I,
really
I,
enjoyed
I
it.
want to sit here and make the joke saying that, maybe at a certain age it's time to hang it up. But then again, we got Clint Eastwood bringing out one of the best movies in the entire year, which we'll talk about next week. But I mean, so maybe it's just him. Maybe it's just him.
Yeah, and I
Ugh.
mean, this was a labor of love. This is something that he's wanted to do for years. I think he has some of his relatives in this movie, or certainly his nephew and his sister
Mhm.
are both in this movie. So yeah, I didn't hate this movie. I thought well of it, and there are some scenes that are just really how can I put it? Just you watch and you think, "Oh my gosh, what am I watching?" Like when John Voight manages to take down his wife and her lover. I'll just leave it at that. You're thinking, "Oh my gosh, this is really weird and wild." So I mean, I certainly enjoyed it. I thought this is a man who's really swinging for the fences, and he's hitting. He's hitting like doubles, but no, I can understand why some people absolutely hated it and walked out of it, but I'm
Mm.
one of those people that did enjoy it more than most others.
Yeah. All right. What's the next one?
Yeah, I don't think either of you saw this, but Kinds of Kindness by Yorgos Lanthimos. This was, I mean, it's basically just like a collection of stories about. Can't
I
even explain.
almost, I almost went to see this movie, and then I just opted against it later
It's
on.
It's
almost
on
Yeah.
3
Disney
hours
Plus,
long,
right?
so
Isn't it? It's on Disney
it's
Plus or
it's
Hulu or one of
you have
those.
to kind of be looking forward to like weird interpersonal stories. Um, you know, probably some sex scenes. Hunter Schafer, yeah, shows up. That's a dude, by the way. So
Yeah.
I always like to point that out.
A
Um,
dude named Hunter.
but there's Emma Stone's in it. You have Margaret Qualley's in it. It's you've got some definitely talented actors doing some very weird experimental dramatic satirical commentary on humanity in the future. I mean, Willem Dafoe's in this one part. It's just it's a mess as a movie, but like as a sort of like experimental artistic expression, it's worth checking out if you're into those movies. But yeah, it's very weird. It doesn't really work narratively or even just expressively as having a theme or anything. It's just okay. I guess this is an off year for Yorgos, so he just wanted to make one weird ass movie. So, and I mean, he just did Poor Things, so it at least makes a little bit of sense. But yeah, Jesse
Mhm.
Plemons is in it, so I don't have a whole lot to say about this one. It just didn't really work, but um, throughout it, there would always be like a flourish or an interesting scene or an interesting aspect to a performance, but just not enough to really give it a positive review and overall as a movie.
My take from Rob, and I did not see this movie, although it's on my watch list on Disney Plus or Hulu or one of those, is that there are aspects that were interesting, but as a whole, the movie was not good and not worth the 3 hours or however much runtime that it had. I'll say this. I think Yorgos Lanthimos is a bit of an acquired taste. I was not impressed with Poor Things, and as much as I liked Emma Stone, I think her performance was very mannered
Mm-hmm.
and I thought very calculated, which is why I was disappointed that she won over Lily Gladstone, which I thought was a better performance. But it's not something that I would go to. I think it's interesting. I think the most accessible Yorgos Lanthimos movie is The Favorite. I think that's the one that's like the most normal or the one for normies. Even though it does have its odd moments, at least um, costume dramas are a little more accessible than whatever this was. But
Yeah,
again, I did not see it.
Normie, and here's the thing: Killing of a Sacred Deer is one of those movies where it's just like, okay, if you're fucked up and twisted, you absolutely love it. Everybody else hates that fucking movie. I love it because it's based. Okay, it is the most twisted version that you could come up with of what a comedy could be. You know what I mean? With what happens to that couple with their kid and everything, and Barry Cohegan is just basically telling them all the awful things that are about to happen to them. And so it's just, yeah, it's just what he is one of those directors that likes to push people's buttons more than provide a satisfying narrative conclusion or anything like that.
Yep.
Next up is Arthur the King, which I thought I was going to hate. It's Mark Wahlberg, who's kind of getting back into like the cross country X Games, whatever event, that he's like failed multiple times at. And he is helped along the way by this scrappy dog. And
Who like him is Scrappy?
supposed to be inspiring, and it's fine. Listen, it's fine. If you like this type of movie, this like overcoming adversity.
If you have a heart and you like movies with dogs, and yeah, this is for you.
Yes, it's good. It's fine. It's just very like there's not much that's gonna surprise you. It's not super exciting, but like it's fine. It's a fine way to kill like an hour and 40 minutes. Simu Liu is in it, and he's annoying, but other than that, it's a totally fine movie. But yeah, it could have been a lot worse. Is how I'll put it. It's not overly annoying. It's not overbearing. It comes, it goes, it moves along. But yeah, it's
it makes me think that again, I did not see this. It makes me think that this is a type of movie that knows it has a target audience and made something that would appeal to that target audience. Those that like triumphant stories of overcoming adversity and who like dogs and how adorable they can be. So it knows who it's appealing to. It catered to them. It made a movie that they would like. And so you can't really fault a movie for knowing its audience and making a movie that would be crowd pleasing. So I guess that's why it works. But yeah, it's not something I would rush out to see, especially because I still don't think Mark Wahlberg can act, and I just wonder why people insist that he can.
I'll talk a little bit more about this film when I get to my list because it's on mine too. So,
and then last movie I have on my list is Land of Bad. So this was a movie that I don't know why, but I avoided watching for the longest time. So it's not basically it's like Delta Force getting caught behind enemy lines and needing to survive until they can find their way out. It's pretty straightforward. I think Liam Hemsworth is in it because I watched it so long ago. I'm trying to remember, but and I just remember it like it's like an okay thriller. A lot of people really liked it though, who tend to be more on what was it, Sound of Freedom, who like that one, and I think they were recommending this in connection to that. I mean, it's okay. If you've got 100 minutes to kill, an hour 40 minutes, whatever, I'd say it's worth a watch. But 140 minutes, by the way, is 2 hours and 20 minutes. Yeah, I'm really paying attention today. But yeah,
that's a lot of
it's just one of those movies that like I gave I think it was 2.5 out of 5. It's not terrible. It's again not a bad way to kill some time, but not much to write home about. But yeah, it definitely got some positive reviews from a lot of people I saw on Twitter.
Which is
so
interesting.
The moral.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No. Go ahead, Jacob. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the moral of Rob's list is do not make a film that's over 2 hours and 30 minutes, or you will end up on the 2.5 out of 5.
Yeah.
Well, no, I like. It's funny you say that because I actually like long movies. I'm looking forward to seeing The Brutalist, which is 3 hours and 35 minutes
with intermission.
It just depends if it's good or not. It's just, but when it's a bad movie and it's 2 hours and 45 minutes, I
feel it.
Absolutely your movie.
You feel it. Like some films that are very long, you don't feel. Like I've never felt the length of Ben-Hur. I've never felt the length of Lawrence of Arabia. For me, they go by quick. I will say that Liam Hemsworth is another person who I think can act, and his brother as well. So all those people who are pushing for Furiosa to get a supporting actor nomination, you people are drunk or insane. Because no, but I've not heard of this movie at all, so I can't even comment on what it would be because I've never heard of it until now.
So Rick, I guess we're gonna swing this one over to you. What movies do you have for your mid list of 2024?
All right. Well, I'm gonna cut down my list. I think I have too many, so I'm just gonna hit some of the highlights. I agree with Rob, The Apprentice. So we've already talked about that. Another one that I would put on my mid list is Moana 2, because this is a movie that I guess it's harmless enough. It knows again its target audience, so it's for kids and their parents who will like the new adventures of our heroine. When I went to see it, it was fine. I mean, I don't think a lot of the songs are great. I like the first two. I have to admit, I like the first two songs, and I think one of them is on the short list. But they don't stick with you. And I think they double down on some of the things that they thought worked in the first one. Like you had the Coconut Pirates, and they were fine in the first one, although I thought unnecessary here. They were almost like secondary characters. You didn't really have The Rock or Maui be part of the whole story. I think he was kind of tacked in because people were expecting him. And then the suggestion that there's going to be a Moana 3 kind of bothered me because
There
it's like,
is. It made too much money for it
yeah,
not being Moana 3.
yeah. But again, there was a mid-credit scene, and the only reason I saw it was because again I was still gathering my things when it was popping up. Most of the audience had already left, and I think it's a bad decision. But I think too many people are trying to make this into a grand series of epic films or epic story when it's not there. I mean, Moana's fine. Again, I think you could take your kids to see it, and they will enjoy the colors and they will enjoy the heroine. Though the little girl who was sitting next to me did ask her dad at one point, "Is it almost over?" So that doesn't indicate that it's going to be great. One thing we need to remember though is I think Moana 2 was meant as a Disney Plus television series. So what they did is somehow cobble together a whole movie out of it. And I think that's why some people think it feels episodic. And for me, it was fine. It is mid because it was fine. I didn't hate it, but I mean, even if it's not for me, it's not something that I would really want to see, and not a Moana 3. I really don't want to see, that the crab come back for revenge. I mean, why? I mean, I don't see the point of that.
I will say this, and I'm gonna be kind of honest with you here. When we did our review of Moana 2, the first time I saw it, I literally fell asleep about 30 minutes in, woke up an hour later, and just like, you know what, I'm just giving this a 2 out of 5 and moving on with my life. so, so,
Yeah.
yeah, if I had more details, it'd probably be on there, but that's just me. But go on with your next
All
one
right.
there.
Well, the next one is one that I think is being wildly overrated, and I don't understand why so many people are. Well, I think I understand why so many people are passionate for it, but why do people keep insisting that Wicked should win Best Picture or should be in the running for it? Wicked, I guess, is fine in that I like the production design. I like the costume design. I thought those were very well made. I thought that they really did capture this fantastical world of Oz. But as someone who does not know the musical, I don't. I don't have enough passion for it. I will admit that I have seen it twice. The first time to complete my Wizard of Oz retrospective. The second time because my BFF and his partner asked me to go with them, and I felt bad about saying no. So I went to see it again, and they liked it more than I did. Although I think we can say that it is far too long, and we have to remember this movie, which is a part one, is actually about the same length as the actual Broadway show, and that includes the intermission. I think for part two, they're going to throw in a bunch of new songs, and really, for people who like this movie, I guess it's fine. For me, I gave it a passing grade only because I was really impressed by the costuming and the production design. I thought I thought those elements were great, but everything else is like this movie is too long. I'm not impressed with the performances. I don't understand why so many people are pegging Ariana Grande to win Best Supporting Actress. It's like no, and
It's the
like
year of the dying pop star. Why wouldn't you give it to her, right?
well, no, and that I can tell you that my coworkers who are like Zoomers, some of them hate her because she's a homewrecker and man leech and all that sort of stuff. Get
Of
lost in
course.
that sort of
Of
details of her
Her
course.
private life.
fiance is in the movie too, by the way. Ethan,
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
his face is, it's
yeah,
so funny.
yeah. The Munchkin,
The Munchkin, yeah.
the Munchkin is her fiance who left his wife and pregnant. Left his wife who was I think pregnant at the time for
Yep.
her. It was like I don't know why. But I think too many people are saying that this is a great film. And it's like, oh, musicals are back. No, they're not. I mean, it's fine in that I liked how the film looked, not the cinematography, because when I saw it again, it was like there's too much bright light coming from the back, and that was becoming a big issue. But in terms of how the film looked in its production and its costuming, I thought, yeah, this is good. I gave it a passing grade just for that, but not for the performances, not for the songs. Although I figure that all these songs are straight from the musical, and I only know two of those songs, so it's fine. This is okay movie, but geez, people are really talking it too much, as in, oh, this was going to be a best picture contender. It's going to Ariana Grande
Who
is
knows? It
certain
may
to
be.
win.
It may be.
Okay, the way, and here was my experience. The way that people both on both sides of this like talked about in this movie, where people on the right were like, it's doing, it has all this gay stuff in it and whatever, it's woke, it's all this stuff, and then people who loved it are like, oh, it's showing like their gay relationship, and there's it's like both sides sounded crazy, because when I saw the movie, I was like, okay, taking into consideration that it's a retcon, that it's this that's not, from the original books or anything like that, and that it's a Broadway play and all this stuff. It's like taking everything into consideration. It was like, okay, that actually wasn't as bad as I was expecting it to be. And so like for the most part, it was fine. But the more that I think about the characters, the more that I think about the story, the more and more I'm just like, this is terrible. Like the whole like, so the hero of the story
Yeah.
is a person basically perpetuating their own propaganda piece. If that's what I can take away
And
from
I will say this
she's the
too.
victim. She's the poor victim.
Yeah. I mean, the whole inverse of, trying to turn all the evil characters into like, no, 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 they're not evil. They're just misunderstood. It's like, stop it. Just stop with this whole trend. And then with the whole thing with the whole LGBTQ angle to it, and this is why I do think it's getting a lot of award and recognition. Everyone's pushing for it. It's because, like I said, that there is a lot of ode to, LGBTQ relationships and queerness. And we all heard the awful promotional tour for this as well. So it's certainly there. And I think that's what they're going off of here, because like I said, Trump's going to be president again in about a month, so they need a film that they think is going to be a message against Trump. This is how these people think, right? That they're in a bubble where they only huff their own farts and listen to their own opinion. So in their mind, they're looking for a movie that they can use to weaponize against Trump, so that when people are doing their award speeches, they can be like, well, I'm just going to speak out against 47 because fascism and blah blah blah. So I think that's primarily the reason why this film is getting good, but it's not a good movie in any stretch of the imagination. We'll talk
Well,
about this in 2 weeks.
But
I will
music,
say
see,
that
here's the thing: musicals, like I don't know, maybe I'm just being stereotypical here, are almost inherently gay, just because there's a lot of like, choreographers, dancers, people that are employed by the Broadway industry are very incredibly gay. And so to me, musicals just incorporate that naturally, regardless of what the story of the show is about. But whatever, maybe that's just me stereotyping things. But so I always looked at that as a baked in thing. People eliciting like meaning from the story, it's just like, that's just pure projection. But that's not anything new to these people either. So
well, first I will say I still don't know what holding space actually means, and I'm thoroughly confused by all of that conversation.
those press interviews are insane,
Yes,
by the way.
yes,
Insane.
they are really bizarre, and I'm like, holding space. What is that? I don't even understand. I mean, I know English enough to know. I don't think how that phrase works. I think there is say a lot of gayness because the prince character seems to elicit desire among every single individual, male or female. I'm surprised that some of the animals aren't enthralled with him either. So I guess that's where you could see it. And I think this musical is very big with the gay community. I think they take Defying Gravity, which is the big number at the end. I think
Mhm.
they take it as some sort of anthem. I don't know, but I mean that's fine. But the reason it's a mid for me again is because while I like the production design, while I like the costuming, I did not think it was this fantastic, great film that is deserving of like best picture or best lead
Mhm.
actress, supporting actress, all of this. I mean, sure, give it some technical awards, but mm, why so many
I
people
thought
put it as the great film?
to answer Corn's question here, I think that they were it was cringe to us, but they were pandering to their industry and to their industry. All that pandering and all the crying and all the other stuff that went on there, it worked for them. So it's like they know who the marks are in Hollywood. So that's all I'll say there.
Well, all right. So the next one that I have is Twisters. This is a movie that I guess knew its audience, and I guess it was also coasting on the first film, which is really liked by a lot of people. I think we saw it on a Friday night, and
Yeah,
yeah, it was fine. People love that flying cow. That was a big thing back in back
flying
in the
CGI cow.
yes, that was great for a lot of people, and people still love it. I know, rest her soul, my mom really wanted to see it just because of the flying cows. Like I don't know why, but we've got Glenn Powell, who certainly has had a banner year this year, and he's been crowned as one of the kings of Hollywood. Um, this movie was fine because I guess it was for me a film that you could watch without really thinking much about it. And if you actually gave it some thought, you would think this is not this doesn't make much of any sense. But it was fine. It was entertaining. It was one of those films that I guess knew its audience and just went with it. So I didn't hate this movie as maybe I thought I would, but I don't think that it's good. Though I understand that the song is in the short list for original song, which is fine. But I was not impressed with all the people who liked it. And I actually think that the effects in the first Twister were better than the one here, despite the technology that's advanced. But apparently, all you need to do when you have a massive tornado is just hold on to a seat in the theater,
Mhm.
that's like over 100 years old, and all you need is just your, Glenn Powell's great muscular build to hold you from being sucked into a massive tornado and then being swept off to Oz, where you'll be popular. I don't know. It's fine. I mean, I gave it like a maybe a two. It was not a great film, but I guess you can enjoy it if you really don't think about it and don't worry about the characters or anything like that. So that
Or the
that's
lack of
that's
chemistry between the two leads, or
that as well.
the pure idiocy of the movie itself, or any of those
But
things.
that's what people really wanted to see. Just they wanted to see the pure idiocy of it
But
all.
see,
They were
this is
not
my biggest
interested in plot.
problem with this movie is the fact that it doesn't, like, as a sequel, it doesn't up the ante. It doesn't improve on what the original did so well, which is those storms, which is the destruction, which is the sort of like, awe-inspiring awfulness of tornadoes and how they wreak havoc in these, small communities across Oklahoma, Kansas, whatever. And this movie is just like, we're good-hearted YouTube chasers, and I fucking hate you so much. Like, I already
Yeah,
was coming into this movie ready to fucking hate it, and then like Daisy Edgar Jones with her non-personality, bland fucking like girl next door personality, just, and then Glenn Powell being this stupid cowboy. I'm a
if
generic
you
hot
feel
dude.
it,
Like,
face
okay,
it,
yeah, I know.
chase it.
So
You
the whole
feel it.
thing just rubbed me the wrong way, but yeah.
Well, didn't you like how they were apparently bad because they were selling merchandise, which you found tacky, but then you find out that
Right.
all of
They're
that was
good-hearted.
yeah, all of that was just to raise funds to help these poor
Right.
storm victims when you could just instead of having merchandise, you could just donate directly and it would save you money because you wouldn't have to pay to have all that material made. So yeah, but again, it's for me it was, it knew what it wanted, and
Correct me
audiences
if I'm
liked it.
wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. The girl who got wasted by the tornado at the very early of the movie, was that the same girl who played the witch in Red One?
Kiernan Shipka, yes, it is.
Okay,
Oh,
making sure.
Yeah, I like pointing that out. It's like she's had a year of like not making much of an impact.
Being in big movies and
Oh,
still not being a draw.
hold on. She was in Long Legs as well, which I don't know if you guys actually got to see, but
Oh yeah, yeah, I know what you're talking about the
yeah,
Nicolas
she's in
Cage
that
one.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, no, I got the screener for it, so I might pop that in. All
Is this
right,
just gonna
so
sit there and collect dust?
well, no, Anora's here, and Anora, it looks like it's going to win Best Picture, so I have
Yeah,
to watch
watch that
that.
one.
All
Yeah.
right, I'll watch that one.
It makes you
Another.
sympathize with the horror, but yeah, it's a good movie.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah.
I would say that another film that I think is mid is one that I don't think a lot of people saw or even heard of. It's Average Joe, and it's based on a Supreme Court case where a football coach sued the school district in order to get his job back because he always prayed at the 50-yard line, win or
Mhm.
lose, and they were saying that that was an endorsement of religion. um, my problem with it is that I think what it was trying to do was it was trying to cater to two audiences. It was trying to cater to the evangelical Christian audience that would feel that the coach would be like someone they could look up to because he stood up for his faith, which is good for him. But they were also trying to play it very secular by trying to, I guess, wink too much at the audience, and even have some kind of risque moments. I mean, the movie, if memory serves correct, opens up with our lead character as a younger man, um, on a truck at night trying to rope some cows while wearing only a cowboy hat and his underwear. And then this is how a Christian movie apparently begins. And they were saying that, oh, well, that's not what happened. And the guy, the older man, looks, the older version just looks at camera and says, oh yeah, there was less clothing involved, winking to us. And they were trying, I think, to be maybe a little too clever with the material. A more straightforward telling of this story might have been a little more dry and maybe a little more saintly, but at least it would have been better than constantly winking to the audience and trying to show, hey, look, we know we're in a movie. We're making all these quips about how we're a movie. One thing that was a little peculiar for people who thought of this as a quote Christian film is that our character, even though he's had some sort of religious experience and has embraced faith, is remarkably ignorant about it. In one scene, he meets up with an atheist who does not like what he's doing, going to the 50-yard line and praying there. And he says, he compares him, you're just like Peter. And this guy who's supposed to be a Christian says, Peter who? And then the way he is told who Peter is, he needs a Batman and Robin analogy where Jesus is Batman and Peter is Robin. This is how it
Pretty
has to
funny.
be. It has to be explained to him. And I'm thinking, I'm not the best person when it comes to faith. I'm not baptized, even though I go to a Baptist church and I like going there. But even I have a little bit of knowledge about Peter and Christ. Although to be fair, having discovered that most people have no idea what the Odyssey is, and most people think that Jesus was quote Palestinian, maybe this guy thinking that he had no idea who Peter was, maybe that's not too far off. That's not too far. That's not too far off the truth. But for me, this movie, I think, was really trying to play the two audiences simultaneously, and it was not working. It was trying to be too jokey at times. It was trying to be too in the know about that they were in a movie, but at the same time trying to play it sincere and straight. So it was, yeah, it came close to working, but not quite there. So that's why it's kind of like a mid movie because it was like somewhere on the cusp. If it had gone one way or the other, it might have been better. So it was a lost opportunity for me.
I will say this: this film comes off very much like one of those like God's Not Dead type movies. And I don't know if it has like the same like production team or whatnot, but I could tell just by looking at a few scenes, it feels like kind of the similar long line there. And another thing, how many more movies about Tim Tebow are we going to make? Like, we get it now. Like it's been a while.
Oh, well, no, I mean that's not Tim Tebow, but yeah, in that same vein, it was trying too hard to try to be two things, and I don't think it worked. All right, so I've got about two more left, and I'm leaving some off. But these are two that I want to focus on. The one that is mid next is Conclave, another film that is being touted as Best Picture, and that it's this great, back, pulls the curtain on the inner machinations of the Catholic Church. It
Mhm.
could have worked if it had been about that, but instead it became this very pretentious, pompous. Oh, aren't we great? Aren't we art? Aren't we
You mean like
insightful?
certain Catholics that we know in our circle?
No, I'm gonna throw a little bit of rice about that at you. I'm gonna just throw a little bit of rice at that idea.
Shame, shame.
The problem that I had is that it thought it was intelligent and it thought it was clever, but it was not. What it was slow, boring. It kept coming up with all of these characters that were really just silly. You had the one that was almost hysterically conservative, the conservative Catholic who was, borderline calling for his own jihad.
I
You
like that guy,
had,
by the way. He was
huh?
awesome.
Oh,
I like that. He was the one guy that like I was like, yeah, he's right. Like, get rid of the Arabs. What are you doing?
oh, okay, yeah, yeah. He would get you back into the Catholic
Sorry,
fold.
Muslims. Sorry, that just in case. Yeah.
Hey, there are Lebanese most majority of Lebanese are Christian, and then you've got kind of the almost hippy drippy liberal American one. But the big thing is that mysterious cardinal, who you end up finding, this is not a spoiler, you find out is really I think a hermaphrodite, and we're just
Yep.
going to elect this person based on one
By the
speech.
way,
Based on one speech that he
one
gives.
speech at the very end of the movie, and then it's
Yeah.
only afterwards they find out. Oh, by the way, this person's a hermaphrodite. It's like, oh no! This is
Yeah, we didn't know this because the Pope
Mhm.
had kept that hidden. I do feel though that I go back and forth on Isabella Rossellini. I think her part really is too small for a supporting actress, but some people have pointed out other people have won for like 5 minutes of screen time, and she would be more like a career lifetime win. But if it takes Isabella Rossellini to stop Ariana Grande from being an Oscar winner, I'm down with that. I don't mind. But
But that ending alone,
yeah,
to me, disqualifies it even considering it for the mid list, just because it's so egregious and it's so
Yep.
bad. And it's like you spent all this time with the quietly whispering and like I didn't think it was a great movie by any means, but it was like relatively watchable. And then it just like goes off the deep end, and I'm like, okay, was that worth it?
yeah, no, it was that. Yeah, that's what makes it mid, because it was okay if it had stuck to its original idea or what it was presented to me, that it was just about the the politicking and the wheeling and dealing in order to elect a new pope. And I'm pretty sure that there is that, but it was just presenting so many of these really boring and nonsensical characters, and all speaking in very hushed tones, except for the crazy Italian conservative who just
Yeah.
like to scream all over the place. But I think the fact that so many people are insisting that this is a certified Best Picture winner, this is something that is up there. It's one of the best films of the year. You people are on crack. And the last movie that I'm going to hit is Bad Boys Ride or Die, a movie that I did not hate, but I think it's one sequel too many. I mean, you're really seeing these two old guys just
I
trying.
mean, Martin Lawrence. Martin Lawrence literally looks like a stroke victim in this movie, and it's like I was just watching like Martin on Netflix because they have like the whole season out there. When you
Mhm.
watch him on there and watch him in this movie, yes, it's 30-year difference, but at the same time, that's what makes it worse is that he just looks so bad in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. This is a man whose character had a heart attack while doing the wobble. So I actually laughed. I actually laughed when he's like wobble, wobble. And he's like, like keeling
Mhm.
over. And you think, look, I guess the fans of this franchise, and I never understood why it was a franchise. The first one was, entertaining. I think we all saw it on a Friday night. The first one was entertaining. I've not seen any of the others. I just think that this is one too many, and we really don't need another Bad
especially
Boys.
especially when they're both pushing 60 now. Like that's like the big thing. It's like
Yeah,
the first
but
one was great because the first one it was people forget the first movie was really Martin Lawrence's movie because he was a bigger star than Will Smith at the time period. So the first one focuses more on Martin's character. Then it does the second one came out in 2003, and that's you can say that was arguably the best one of the two because they like Michael Bay go full Michael Bay in that movie. And then after that, it's like you went like 20 years without doing the Bad Boys movie. Really didn't need another one, and now you just got like two busted looking 60-year-olds trying to do the same Bad Boys Forever shtick they were doing like they're still 30 and they're not.
yeah, and there were so many things that were kind of illogical. I still don't understand how that guy is Will Smith's illegitimate son, even though he looks nothing like him. It's not even
That
close.
was a whole big thing in the last movie, but you said you didn't watch it, so yeah, it was
Yeah,
a
I hadn't
big
seen any
deal.
of that. I only saw the first and this one, but I guess this appealed to the fans, the people who saw it in the theater with me. I mean, not I didn't go with anyone, but the people in the theater, they enjoyed it. So I guess it appealed to the fan base who like watching all of this. So that's why it's mid, because I guess it knows its audience enough that it gave them what they wanted, which was, I guess, seeing Martin Lawrence's ass in front of everyone and having him convinced that he was not going to die. So, I mean, yeah, it's not good. I didn't think it was good. I maybe gave it a two, but because it knows what it gave its audience, and its audience liked it, yeah, that's why it's mid for me.
Yep. Like I said, I don't agree. For me, the two movies that you listed, I have it just slightly lower than mid. I just have them as bad. This one, like I said, it's a cash grab, but it's like at this point, it's like you got to stop with this one. I mean, like I said, like half of Martin Lawrence's face doesn't even work at this point. Like you got to stop on that aspect. The only thing about Conclave that I will say, the only thing I will name it as a positive is that there's so much scarlet and purple in the movie talking about the Roman Catholic Church. It makes my job a lot easier proving that they are in fact Mystery Babylon and Revelation 17. But that's something we can talk about on the Bible Lens on another day because apparently know that angers people when I mention
All
that.
right.
But
Well, we're gonna get Isabella Rossellini her overdue Oscar. All right. This is going to be the movie to give it to her. Apparently.
all right. Well, some of you guys mentioned some of the films that I have on my list here, so we're gonna run through this one as quickly as possible here. This is my top 10 mid list of 2024. I'm gonna start off here with a controversial one. I'm gonna go with Civil War because I know Rob loves this movie a lot more than I did. But if you guys watched our episode about this a few months back, you kind of know like where the big divide is here with this movie. To me, in order for this film to make sense, you kind of have to take an ideological stance somewhere to at least make sense of how the country ended up in this position in the first place, right? And the film goes, in my opinion, so far out of its way to not blame one side or the other, it just becomes completely illogical. You're supposed to believe that somehow in the future, California and Florida somehow decided to join forces with Texas, by the way,
Texas.
to join forces to succeed against a fascist regime in the United States of America. We don't really know how exactly he became a fascist dictator. It just sort of happened. And then he's framed as the bad guy, but we don't exactly know what exactly he did. So there's a lot of key details that will that's supposed to tie the audience into the emotional grip of the story, but we don't ever get those details. So you're kind of like riding the waves and riding the emotions of a story, where it's like the key aspects are not really that clear. So it's very hard to, I guess, for in my perspective, it's hard to be as gripped into the story as I should be. If you at least have those details, you can kind of agree to disagree, but at least there's something to go off of here. This one just kind of feels like you're just going along with the ride, and then when it's all said and done, it's kind of like, well, you didn't really make a statement on anything, so it's hard for me to really go all in on this movie. Outside of that, there's a lot of things that I really liked about the film. Like I said, the cinematography style, the acting is really good. So it's not a film that I absolutely hated. It's just that for a story, like you really need those things to really, elevate everything else. And I just didn't feel like we had it. So this is probably a perfect example of a movie that was super split on. I think everything outside of the actual script itself was really, really good, but the script and it's not being as good as it should be really harmed it for being much higher on the list for me. So that's why I stuck it at a 2 out of 5, and that's why it's on my number 10 list. I mean, my number 10 spot, I've been just saying. The number 9 spot for this one is a little film called Elevation. This came out not too long ago. It stars Anthony Mackie and whoever played Deadpool's girlfriend in that did Deadpool movies. I don't remember her
Monica
name.
Baccarin, I believe.
Literally, the only thing I know about her is that she left her husband for some guy who was on Gotham, and then that's like literally all I remember about her story. So that's as much as I know about her.
And they have children now, so I remember her.
Well, that makes it better. But no, so the whole concept of this story here is that it's post-apocalyptic future. Aliens, monsters, demons came out of the ground one day and started killing everyone, and the only people who are safe are those who just so happen to live above 8,000 feet elevation. So Anthony Mackie's kid gets sick. He has to go down into Boulder City to get medicine in order for his kid to survive. And of course, they have to deal with these monsters that technically can't really see, but they can hear things. And it's like they follow on sound. So there's a lot of odes to the A Quiet Place film franchise here, even though this is similar in its setup. But my problems with this film is this. It is very, very right down the middle. Like, this is the perfect example of a mid film, right? It's I think I wrote in my review, it is a movie that came out in 2024, and that's the best thing that I could say about it. The what is it, the acting from the two girls who are in the movie, obviously her and another girl, it feels like their part were actually supposed to be written for men, but then obviously I guess DEI reasons they decided to opt around that to give it to women, which I don't think really helped the film at all. Anthony Mackie is just really not a leading guy in any aspect of anything really, and then Disney put like a $400 million film on his back, so that's gonna bite him in the ass pretty hard here too. And then the whole thing with like the monsters, then you kind of get an explanation towards the very end about what's really happening. But even then, it's kind of like, okay, then, so are you guys actually have the audacity to think you're going to set up a sequel with this film, which is exactly what they do. They think they're actually getting a second movie, which I'm pretty sure is never going to happen. So it's also left on a cliffhanger here. The one things that I will say about it is that, the monsters are pretty creative in their aspect. And the action is actually pretty good too. Like, you do have some creative set pieces. They're in some spots where they have to like find a way to get around these creatures, so it requires them to kind of team up and stuff like that. So there's things of that I do like, but outside of that, it's very, very generic and very, very by the numbers. That's probably the best way that I can describe this movie. It is a by the numbers film. It's my number 9 on my mid list here. Now, a film that we haven't talked about here as well is another film that I'm not sure you guys saw. It's a film called Ezra. Have any of you guys seen the Ezra this year?
No.
So it's a film that came out a while back ago. It's a story about Bobby Cannavale. Is that his name?
Cannavale, yeah.
Cannavale, yeah. So he's a New York stand-up comedian, and he has an autistic son. He just got divorced from his wife, but his stand-up career is going pretty well. He's at the cuffs where, if he can get booked on a late-night show like Jimmy Kimmel, then maybe his career can blow up, and that's kind of where he is right now. But obviously, he's having a lot of issues with his wife and obviously his son, which is the reason like why they broke up, because he completely disagrees with how they need to raise his son. He's in the mindset that, his son's special, but he doesn't need to be treated like he's special, but because he refuses to accept his son's autistic diagnosis, he's preventing him from leading a much better life, and it can get him the help that he needs, and that's kind of what leads to this whole situation. So he decides that, I'm not gonna put my kid on drugs, I'm not gonna send him to a special school, so I'm just gonna kidnap him and drive to LA so that I can go to Jimmy Kimmel, become a star. And of course he ends up being on a most wanted list because he kidnapped his child and went across country, which is something that you don't really do. But so in part of this film, it's heartwarming because it's about a father trying to reconcile a relationship with his son. Rose Byrne is in the movie playing his ex-wife. Robert De Niro's also in the film playing his father. So there's a lot of ode to family and dealing with tough situations with special needs kids. So on one aspect, there's a lot of things that could endure to an audience, especially if you have special need kids or family members and stuff like that. However, this film, and the reason why it's on my mid list, is that it's completely unrelatable to anyone else that's outside the Hollywood bubble. And here's what I mean here. This is a film about a stand-up comedian in New York who's trying to become a star in Los Angeles, but you're trying to tell a story that's going to relate to the everyday average person. Well, it's like, guess what? The everyday average person is not going to identify with the plight of a stand-up comedian who's boggled between New York City and Los Angeles. And then you throw in a late cameo with Jimmy Kimmel, which I hate to break this to you, Jimmy Kimmel is not a likable personality in any way, shape, or form in 2024. So putting him in your movie is not going to help matters because of all the things that he's done and said over the last 10 years. Like, honestly, if you wanted to do this one, you probably have a much better chance of, I don't know, going with Jimmy Fallon, maybe. I don't even know who's in LA anymore as a late night host. That's how detached to the late night scene that I am. And then again, you're talking about a concept that it might have worked well in the 1980s, where stand-up comedians actually did go on late night shows and do stand-up routines and became a star. But that hasn't been a thing in 20 years now? Maybe 25 years, if I'm being honest with myself. So there's just a lot of aspects of the story that from the Hollywood bubble that just doesn't work in the context of a film that's supposed to be about, a kid and a father and trying to relate to families and that whole thing. It's like you're trying to do two things simultaneously. It just doesn't work. So it's not a bad movie. It's not a terrible movie, but there are things that just make you go, I don't really know if this is the right way to present this story. That's kind of the biggest knock on Ezra there. So that's number 7 on the list. This is probably going to be that was number 8. Number 7 is going to be a controversial one because I put Roadhouse on the list. I know Rob absolutely hated this movie. I love this movie from the one aspect that Conor McGregor is a glorified crazy person. Like, he is a certifiably insane individual. Ever since he got his $100 million payout with Floyd Mayweather boxing several years ago, the dude's been nonstop, on cocaine, partying, sexually harassing women in front of his wife, and doing all kinds of just psychotic things. So when I'm watching him in this movie, I realize, knowing who Conor McGregor is, he's not acting at any point in this film. So if he comes off as a crazy, deranged individual, that's because he is a crazy, deranged individual. So for me, the biggest selling point in this film is watching Conor McGregor act like a complete lunatic. Outside of that, and outside of the acting of Jake Gyllenhaal, there really isn't nothing about this movie that I would sing home about. This whole movie is carried on the wild and crazy acting of Conor McGregor, and basically Jake Gyllenhaal being very, very stoic, being a former UFC fighter turned, I guess, bar cooler, as they used to call it back in the day. I'm not sure they still call it that this day, but to me, Conor McGregor's the MVP of this film. Obviously, what was your biggest biggest complaint about Roadhouse when we reviewed it a while back, Rob?
Well, biggest issue is that it's called Roadhouse. Is that it's supposed to be a remake of the Patrick Swayze movie from 1989. Yep. I think that's really
reimagining.
Problem. And then the whole thing about Doug Liman and Jake Gyllenhaal wanting it to be a theatrical release, and Jeff Bezos basically telling them to fuck off. That I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, so I don't know if certain concessions were made at a certain point, or if they had to cut scenes or what, but it just seemed like a half-hearted release, on top of it not having its own ideas to try to remake the story. Conor McGregor, he can be absolutely entertaining, but it's in that over-the-top, ridiculous movie villain way, and that can work. I just it wore thin after a while, and I'm even trying to remember the one scene where he clears an entire beach, and I don't remember if he throws a guy on a fire or something, or anyway, it's just kind of crazy shit. And then you have Jake Gyllenhaal, who I mean, I think Jake Gyllenhaal is still a really talented actor. I'm not sure what's
Mhm.
happened to his career the last couple of years, but
Well, he's
this
been trying to chase his Oscar and just trying for all sorts of projects that are geared for that, the psychological thriller, the art house film, the inspirational biopic, and I don't know what it is that he keeps failing. So
I
maybe
know
he
you
just
And
didn't
up
like
and I like him.
but I thought he was really good in that, and I thought he was good in
in what?
Nightcrawler. I said I know that you didn't like Nocturnal Animals, but I thought he was good in that. And I know he was in Nightcrawler, which is pretty good. So
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
like that.
Nightcrawler is personally one of my favorite movies of all time, and then he was great in that movie. So it's like, no, I
Yeah.
have a little bit of a soft spot for Gyllenhaal. I think he's great in the right roles. Like I said, for the character he plays, I think he's pretty well. But I mean, it's like there's really not much else to it to that. And yeah, Connor make a really good Irish. I mean, he is a real life Irish villain, and so I mean,
And then you have to remember, I think Jake Gyllenhaal has pretty much given up after he was in one of those Marvel movies. It's just like, you know what, I can't be seen as a, or I'm not being seen as this great thespian. So yeah, I'm just gonna make this piece of junk in the Spider-Man movie, just because I want money and I want to hit for once.
yeah.
So yeah, maybe that's why he's doing these types of films. I don't know. I didn't see it. I have not even seen the original, so I have no real comment
You weren't
on
here for the
Roadhouse.
movie night when we did the night Roadhouse. We watched it a movie night a while back. Yeah,
No, no,
it was
I
so
was
good.
not. I
yeah.
was not. I'm sure I could find it somewhere. I will just say, just point out with Ezra, I'll say that maybe if they had changed it to like he was going to get a Netflix special, like a stand-up special. That might have been a little more realistic than trying to get on like the Tonight Show. That hasn't been a thing since like Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I can't speak for Rob, but I think you'll get some pushback from me in Civil War. It came a little short from my top 10, but I don't think it needs to have an ideological explanation. And I know that you and I think Rob as well, have disagreed with you
Yeah.
on that one point.
Yeah. Last few films here. Number 6 was Arthur the King. There's really nothing more than Rob had on there. I think he pretty much well covered that one, so we have the same views on that one. Number 5, surprisingly enough, was Furiosa Mad Max Saga, and with this film, I think that everything outside of the main character was actually really, really well done. I go back to basically this being a Chris Hemsworth movie because remember Anna Taylor Joy. I don't even think she even appears in like nearly the first hour of the film. Like she comes very, very later on, and then
Mhm.
she only has like 30 lines of dialogue like in the movie as well. So she's basically cosplaying Charlize Theron's character from the first film, but she doesn't have that much of an impact here. The film is sold on the story, the world building, the characters that are around there. Chris Hemsworth, I think, plays a very vital role early on in the film, even like towards the end, where she goes through all that to get revenge on him, and then doesn't really get the satisfying conclusion that she was looking for based on the things that he did. For me, there's the big problem with these films is not necessarily that it's a terrible movie or a bad movie, is that it's another Mad Max film without Mad Max. And for people who are fans of the Mad Max franchise, you're going into this thinking to yourself, okay, it's another film that's not giving us the character that we actually want. So it's like you only have such a high ceiling when you're dealing with a film that's using the Mad Max name that is completely removing the character out of its existence here. And I think that was kind of the biggest problem with this one. I think they did a lot more to add a lot more story to this film versus obviously the first one, which is all just we're gonna drive to one place for the first hour, then we're gonna drive back in the second hour, and that's been gonna be the whole film. This one tried to do a lot more story because they create the world, explain things a little more. Those details I actually did like, but at the same time, the elephant in the room is that it's a Mad Max story without Mad Max, and that's what's going to end up harming you at the end of the day. So,
I really don't understand why so many people are adamant that this is one of the great epics of the year, and people are like, "Oh, I can't believe it didn't make the short list for visual effects and production and score." Like it's this is an action film that Cinema Intelligentsia seems to love for some inexplicable reason. Why people think that Chris Hemsworth should win Best Supporting Actor for this, I'm sorry. It just, the whole thing is just idiotic. I don't get why people love this movie to the degree that they do. But I wouldn't even call it mid. It's not in my worst list, but I would not call it mid. But hey, it's what you
It's in
think.
mine because it's such a colossal failure as a on a business level.
Oh yeah,
B,
it definitely did not do well.
there's things that people don't even like pay attention to. Like my favorite thing to point out is this what was it, like an 11-year-old girl lasts how long hiding that she's a woman in a desert wasteland full of savages.
At least 20 years.
It's like leaving out a steak in like the will, like in the Serengeti. It's like you're what do you just and again, I don't mean to be like inappropriate or whatever, but I'm just pointing out a basic reality that it's like, okay, we're in a dystopian desert wasteland with awful people that will do anything to survive, basically. So like there's just things about the story that wasn't thought out, wasn't well told. The main character, I suppose, has like a desire for revenge, but I never felt connected to her character. And then you're right, yeah, she doesn't show up until an hour in, and so I mean, there's a lot of issues. I mean, the fact that it got blown up, praised on film Twitter before it ever got released, and then seeing what the end result was just like, you people deserve to get slapped in the face, seriously, because Jacob's right, in there for long periods of time. My original review isn't that scathing, but you go back and it's like for long periods of time, it's watchable, and it's this sort of ceaseless action movie. But I thought the special effects were worse than Fury Road. I thought you could see the kind of the cracks in the CGI and the green screen, and like they love that one scene where the guy with the parachute like comes up, and it's like it's all CGI. You know what I'm saying? And there's nothing wrong with that, but when it doesn't look as visually impressive as Fury Road did, and Fury Road was underwhelming to me anyway, where people were praising that when that came out, and it's just like, this just
even more so because like when Fury Road came out, people were like, "Oh, 10 out of 10, greatest movie I've ever seen." Like people were really going wild.
No, they were. I mean, remember, Fury Road was nominated for Best Picture, and it apparently came close, and I think it won like what, 6 Oscars. So, or very surprisingly good, high number. So yeah, these people really loved Fury Road. So I guess maybe they felt Furiosa was going to be even better. And some are still dying on that hill, that it's like a great epic film and like towers over others. Like, no, this is not your generation's Lawrence of Arabia. Please stop. Pull yourselves together.
I will move on to number 4 here. My number 4 mid film was Deadpool and Wolverine. And I really thought about this one. This is basically a swan song for anything that has to do with the Fox era of Marvel movies. So you're talking about like the Fantastic Four, all of the X-Men. There was one more. Oh, yeah, the Blade movies, obviously talking. So this is basically the MCU saying goodbye to all of those, even though technically this is the introduction of all those characters into the MCU. And of course, their introduction is basically saying goodbye to all the characters, which makes perfect sense. Totally worth paying $71 billion to purchase Fox just to get that 8 years later. So that's great. It's chock full of member berries. The whole thing is that, we're bringing Wolverine into the MCU. We're bringing Hugh Jackman back. Deadpool's in the MCU now as well. And we finally get Wolverine in that yellow suit. And now that we have like the multiverse, it's like, okay, we finally get the suit. We finally get the mask, and everyone was marking out for the mask. It's entertaining in spots. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it's a terrible movie. It does have some good bits here. Of course, it's infamous now, the bit where Wolverine just absolutely runs down Deadpool while they're sitting in the car, to the point where Deadpool's speechless and can't even say anything. I thought that was brilliant. I thought that was arguably the best scene in the entire movie. There's cameos that work, cameos that don't work. Obviously, Blade, I like him a lot. Channing Tatum is hit or miss in certain scenes. Obviously, the Cajun accent, but let's be honest, this is a guy who's been trying to play this character literally for almost 20 years now, and this is his only opportunity to really play it into a big screen. So you got one shot, and I guess he took it here as far as that aspect that goes. For me, the only things that didn't work, like I said, is a whole bunch of member berries, a whole bunch of callbacks and references to other movies. So yes, you do have to go into this knowing 20 years of references to the X-Men movies and all the other movies that came in between it. So it's the same formula as all the other MCU films as well. At this point in the game, the whole shtick of breaking the fourth wall and making all the references, it's either going to work with you or it's not going to work with you. But I think that Hugh Jackman being a part of this, being I guess the more serious actor of the two, does provide a better balance to this one to make it's not nearly as grating as let's say Deadpool 2 was. So if you're looking for something, I guess it's probably the textbook definition of mid. There's some scenes that just don't work. Like I did not care about the opening NSYNC dance number while he's killing a bunch of people. It's like that did not work for me at all. But there's other scenes that did work for me. So it's like this movie is a very much a mixed bag of good and bad, and this is exactly why it's on my list here.
I would say that it might pop up in another list of mine in a couple of weeks. I think that this movie again just it's the first film that I actually thought, oh my gosh, this is actually worse than Argyle. So for me, this is not a good movie because I didn't think that it was funny. I never thought any of the Deadpool movies were funny, though to be fair, I only saw the first one and this one. I don't think it's good in any on any level. I'm tired of Ryan Reynolds just doing this shtick in like every movie that he's in now. I mean, he was capable of acting, but apparently he just can't do anything other than Deadpool in any movie now. So yeah, this is not good. I will say this: as someone who saw Logan once and needs to see it again, I don't know if this really does take away from that poignancy of Wolverine's end. I think a lot of people were not happy about that. For me, it's like I was not super attached. I leave it to other people who love Logan, whether they thought that this kind of mocked his legacy. But for me, yeah, this is not mid. This is bad. This is bad.
Rob, would you agree with that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Like I said, not arguing. I'm not going to pretend like that. Like I said, these aren't great movies we're arguing for here. But number 3 on my list is kind of a surprising pick. The Bob Marley's One Love movie. I actually liked a lot of this film. I think the biggest problem that a lot of people have, which I agree with, is that this is a movie about a very specific time period in Bob Marley's life. So if you went into this thinking you were getting some kind of like a giant biopic about his life and like the rise and the fall and all that, you're not going to get that out of this movie. This is literally a movie about the last few years of Bob Marley's life. I think what's his name, Kingsley Ben Air is his name, did a pretty solid job with the character. I think there was a lot of people in this movie that kind of surprised me from the acting front of this, but like I said, the story is very, very limited. You got to keep in mind that the family of Bob Marley approved of this, so they're going to tell a very, I don't want to say jaded, but obviously a very favorable view of their father, sanitized, right? Because otherwise they're not going to approve of it as well. So you kind of had that being handcuffed as well to the movie, so that worked against it. But then again, if they didn't allow that, they would have never have done the movie, at least not with this group. Like I said, the biggest sticking point here is not a full-fledged rise and fall of Bob Marley. Central Plot is very much about the abridged version of the last few years of his life and kind of what he meant for Jamaica at this time period and all the stuff that was going around there, losing himself in the music scene in Europe and stuff like that. So I mean, that's kind of the key focus of here. Songs are also an interesting selection as well. So it's like they could have done a lot more here with this movie, but they had an idea of what they were going for and they kind of stuck with it for what it is. I think it's solid enough, but obviously there's a lot of flaws that come down to it as well. It's going to bring forth different emotions depending on how hardcore of a Bob Marley fan you are out there. If you're just a casual viewer or if you're a weed smoking Rastafarian who wears the shikis and all that stuff, that it really just depends on how strong your love of Bob Marley actually is. But for me, I thought that it was a pretty decent story and probably one of the few, I want to say, heartwarming stories giving him his tragic end, but it's one of the few kind of feel-good movies that you're going to get out of this year because there weren't a lot of them. So
No, I was not impressed because I thought they didn't present a Bob Marley that was interesting. He seemed very almost bland and boring, and this is not who Bob Marley would be. This is someone who made a lot of music that is still being played today. And he even has his own Sirius XM station. It just kind of made him into a very boring, bland individual. You wouldn't have thought that this man even looked at any other woman other than his wife, which I don't believe was the case. I believed he actually liked the ladies. And I did not know that the song Exodus was inspired by the film score to the film Exodus. So I guess there's that. But no, it just made him a very boring individual, which is kind of not the point of Bob Marley. I don't think he was a very boring individual, but I guess you're right. I could see it being a little kind of mid, but hey, they could have done
I
much
mean,
more.
there's the cultural aspect of Bob Marley. There's a religious aspect of Bob Marley that, of course, they kind of downplayed for the obvious reasons. Maybe it is because of the fact that a lot of those cults that revolve around him are still around today. So if they portray him in a different light versus what these cults know him as, that can rub some feathers the wrong way. You don't want to get the Rastafarians mad at you as well. So I mean, there probably are legitimate reasons why they did it this way as well. So I can't completely dismiss that.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll agree with you. Even though I thought they could have done a better job, and then I was confused. It's like I thought it was going to be about that one Jamaica concert and why they shot him and all this, and then it just
Hmm.
keeps going into other directions. So it was a disappointment. I'll say that's one of the big disappointments for me.
Yep. Anything to add on that one, Rob?
No, I didn't see it.
Fair enough. My number two mid film of the year, and I know Rick is going to be very happy to see this one on the list because he thought it was going to be in my other list, but it's not. It's Dune Part Two. I hated Dune Part One, even though Rick and Sarah absolutely loved that film. I thought that it was boring, contrite, and it was only the Part One of a film series that you were trying to get me like hyped in, and Part One didn't do anything for me. Part two obviously focuses on the meat of the story. I guess you can say that. So there's a lot more happening. There's obviously some character development that's happening here as well. So for me, part two was a lot more digestible than the first one. Now I'll say this: I don't really have that many bad things to say about the movie, outside of the fact that it's possibly about the literal Antichrist, which I'll get to here in a second. But I think Dennis did a good job flexing his muscle, being a visual storyteller. I think he did a very good job of the visual effects in the film here. What's the name? Austin Butler was in this film too, and there's a lot of back and forth about his performance in the movie. I just thought that he was too over the top and goofy in this film, especially considering the fact that I've seen him in other films I thought he was far better at as well. I did not buy him in this aspect here. And then of course you got Timothy Chalamet, who's also in this film too. I'm not a big fan of Timothy Chalamet as an actor, especially a leading actor. Just not buying him as a character here. So there's little things like that. Like half the cast I actually do like, and half the other cast is just like I really don't care for these guys at all. Like Zendaya and Dave Bautista, it's just kind of like I visually will roll my eyes a little bit when they're on screen. But to me, if you really wanted to create the epic of the Dune universe, I think this movie does a far better job than the second one does. But once again, we're left up on a cliffhanger, and I guess there's going to be two more of these at least that they're going to try to shoot out. I know the second one got delayed again, so they're probably not getting that one to 2027 now.
I think it's
And
just
we
one more.
The third
I
one.
think it's just
I
gonna
think it's
tie it.
just one, and there's a prequel series going on right now.
Okay.
The Doom
Well,
Prophecy.
I heard they may split the last one into two parts. That's why I say there could be four of these. So they could be doing like that Hunger Games. We're gonna split the last one into two parts so that everyone's gonna love it more. We'll make more money. It's like I go up that way.
Well, one thing, and this movie will be appearing on another list of mine. One thing that I do agree is that the ending kind of feels rushed, especially because it's such a long movie, and
Hmm.
you feel like, oh, okay, we're getting a third one. I don't know if that was the original plan or they just said, well, the first one was so successful, and this one seems to really be popular as well. So let's just try to lengthen it even more. So I actually could do without a part three, and I love the first two Dunes. I've seen all of them like a total of 5 times. But well, I actually liked it. I thought well of it. I actually thought well of Zendaya, which is rare. But I'm someone who loved the first one, so I like the second one. Although I've only seen the second one twice. I like the first one that I saw 4 times. So there you go.
Rob, nothing to add on this one.
I mean, Dune Part Two is kind of interesting. There are things about it that I think are impressive and are well done. I actually like Austin Butler's performance in it quite a bit. Um, it's to me it's a hard thing to judge because it's not even a movie. It's a part of a story that's continued from part one.
Mhm.
So it, that's why so yeah, that's just for me it's hard to judge on that. I still gave it a pretty favorable score. It might end up at the tail end of my best movies of the year, but I probably have enough movies that I like more, even if I would agree that it's one of the better made movies in terms of its scale, in terms of the the story, the culmination of the story from part one, that carryover, the character arcs. I mean, the scope of the story is massive, and so it's like it. I just feel like it comes up a little bit short overall. So yeah, that's kind of where I land. I think that the mid list is pretty good for it, but you have to remember that there really hasn't been much to put in a top movies of the year list. So
Yeah.
I think that Dune probably did enough to merit a spot, but I might also just be petty. So who knows?
Yep. And to the point I was making earlier about this film being about the Antichrist, the guy who wrote the original book, not the movie we're talking about here, but the original book, I believe he was a former Catholic raised by Jesuit women. And obviously, if you see the whole concept of like the witches that are in the movie that are all female, that are kind of an allegory to the women who raised him. So, as a course of that, he fell away from Catholicism. And to be inspired to write this story, he basically picked and choose and took from all these different religions around the world. Obviously, one being more importantly Islam, taking the story of the Mahdi, who in this context of this story is the Messiah and the hero, right? Well, as we've talked about on the Bible Lens for many, many weeks now, Islam, the Mahdi figure, is quite literally the Bible's Antichrist when you see how those stories parallel to one another, which is why I'm saying that whether they know it or not, and it's Hollywood, so who knows on this side of the fence, it's literally a story about the Antichrist.
Well, I also know that he used Arabic at a time when not a lot of people knew the terms. Like even in the first Dune, the David Lynch
Mm-hmm.
version, you do hear them talking about jihad, and again, that was not a very common term, and it wasn't as associated as it is now with like mass killing. So yeah, and things like the Mahdi and the Muad'Dib. So my understanding is that he just used those words, nothing specific towards pointing people towards Islam. And but I can see the point about
And
the
to be
Benedict.
fair, I don't even know if the guy who obviously wrote this and took the elements of Islam knew
Frank
the
Herbert.
religion well enough. Or Frank Herbert, yeah, that guy. I don't think he knew the religion well enough to understand like what the Mahdi actually represents. So I'm not saying that he personally did so, but when you do grab stuff from other religions, you do end up inadvertently, taking something you probably shouldn't be taking. So
Yeah, it's possible. I think he used the terms because they sounded, exotic and foreign and maybe otherworldly, but did not maybe he did not quite realize what they meant. So well, there's no way of knowing for sure unless you can
yeah.
actually find something that says, yes, I know what this all is. So
Mm-hmm.
it's possible.
So benefit of the doubt on that one. And then my number one mid film of 2024 here. I'm not sure if any of you guys saw it. I did recommend it to you guys a while ago. It's a movie called Good Rich, starring Michael Keaton and Mila Kunis. And this film I actually like and probably have more positive things to say about this movie, but its film is set up like this. Michael Keaton gets a phone call late at night while he's asleep. His wife just announced that she's going to rehab, that she's going to be in rehab for several weeks, and that he needs to take care of the kids, right? right? So he had no idea that his wife even had a drug problem, but now he's stuck raising his very, very young children. Michael Keaton, I think Michael Keaton in real life is like almost 70, but in this film they kind of scale it back to, oh, he's 60. So like, not to be too embarrassing, but his young kids here are like basically like 9 and 10 essentially. And it tells a story about a guy, very, very successful guy, very wealthy guy living in LA. He owns like, art galleries. He goes out there and finds talent and whatnot. But he's also one of these guys that, because he's so focused on his work, he's kind of neglected the people in his life, his family, and that's led to a lot of issues. So he led to an issue with his wife, where her life literally just ups and leaves him without telling him anything like whatsoever. Doesn't refuses to speak to him like at all. It's like, hey, I'll come to the rehab center to like check on you and see. It's like, I don't want anything to do with you at all. So he got to deal with the fact that his marriage is pretty much like dead, like it's over with. And then he has a relationship with his adult daughter, played by Mila Kunis, who doesn't like the fact that he has a new family now who got a lot more time with him than she did growing up. So she has this resentment and jealousy towards the new kids, because they got time with dad that she never got. And even the younger kids are like more in line with like their mother than they are with his father. He's kind of just realizing, it's like, I spent so much time in work that I never really had time like for my family, and now all of a sudden like my family hates me because of it, because I kind of neglected them. And I say the thing that kind of mixes the narrative here is that the way that everyone else reacts to him, right? It's like his wife absolutely despises him. He has a very, very up and down relationship with his daughter, his older daughter. The younger kids are kind of like wishy-washy with him too. You would think that he's just an absolute dirtbag, right? Like the way that everyone's reacting to him, you think that he's just an absolute piece of shit. And he's really not. Like in the course of the film, he's really like shows himself to be a pretty decent, upstanding guy. Like he's a stand-up guy with his clients. He doesn't like he's not nasty with his family, but he just like generally he's just not there as much because he's focused so much on his work. So he's not really like he's a bad guy out of like malice or anything like that. He just that he gets so caught up in his own world that he just neglects people, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And the way that the story kind of progresses throughout the course of the film is like, everyone else has a certain hate for the guy that the audience just isn't going to have watching the movie. And this is kind of the biggest problem here, is that Michael Keaton as a character, his biggest flaw, I guess his biggest sin, if you want to call it that, is that he's just a guy who neglects the women in his life, and the women in his life hate him as a result of that. But it's like, to me, if you're going to hit hard on this one or really sell the theme of this movie, you didn't need to make him a more hateable character that somehow comes to like a redemption point, or you kind of have to like better explain why everyone else hates him the way that they do, right? Because simply just not being there for, it's like, recitals, like, of course you want to be there for the important parts of children's life, but to the level of despisement that they show for him doesn't really match his actions in the film. I think that's kind of the big takeaway here. And another thing, it's another one of those movies where it's kind of in the Hollywood bubble. You're talking about a very, very wealthy guy living in Los Angeles. It's not going to be a relatable story to a lot of people outside of that bubble. And you look at the writer and director of this movie, it seems like she really just made this film kind of as a therapeutic session about her dad, right? And her relationship with her dad, and a lot of instances there. With that said, it's still a very, very good movie. I think it's one of the strongest character stories that we see in the entire year. There's just certain elements of it that really needed some touching up. This could have been one of the top films of the year had there been just a little bit of touching up here, but because of I guess the writer's relationship with the characters and trying to see the world through her lens, and sometimes you really can't do that. That's why you have to have somebody else who kind of like script doctor it a little bit. This movie can misses the mark in a lot of ways because of that disconnect here. But outside of that, I would have given it a much more favorable rating, and it really could have been I think this movie, out of all the movies that I talked about, could have had the best potential to be on the top list of the year with a little bit of work on the script. And like I said, I know you guys didn't get to see it, or you guys didn't check it out. So you did see it. So do you agree with my assessment there?
Actually, for the most part, yes. It was on my short list for mid movies as well, because I think it's acceptable. Now, this image right here that we're seeing, this is when they go on Halloween, and for some reason he dresses his little girl up as Frida Kahlo and him as Andy Warhol. Like, all these people are going to know who those are. In the movie, they even say they have no idea who these kids are dressed up as. more like the requisite gay best friend who has, I guess, who's dressed up. I don't remember. He has kids. I think he has one, and he's dressed up as like a little monster of some kind. Anyway, this is an acceptable movie. It's not particularly great. It's not particularly terrible. I think the reason that I gave it a slightly negative review is because it just seemed a little too rote and mechanical. But one thing I
Hmm.
did agree with you on is the relatability. This is a guy who is, you know, an art gallery owner, and I said to myself, well, why can't he be like a plumber or a mechanic or someone who's like a little more um, grounded, not someone who literally lives up in the hills and oversees the world the way it is up there. So it was fine. It was not particularly good. Some of it felt a little sitcom like when, you know, her water breaks. Mila Kunis's character is pregnant, and her water breaks right as they're having some sort of argument, so he has to rush her to the hospital. And then I didn't like that part where the daughter of the artist decides to basically screw him out of the exhibit. It's like I thought that was kind of pointless, kind of meandering off into another plot altogether. But it was fine. I mean, it's not terrible. It's not great. So this is really a very good mid film. So yeah, I pretty much agree with you on most of that.
Yeah, like I said, you know, they're presenting a character that they really don't like. But even in the context of the films, like when his wife calls him and says, "I'm in rehab, go take care of the kids," like he literally drops everything and takes care of his kids. It's not like it's like, "Oh, I can't do it because I have to go to this event and across the country." It's like he drops everything that takes care of his family, and you think to himself, "Well, it's like, well, if he's willing to do this, then what was kind of like the, I guess, the disconnect point that led to half his family hating him the way that he does?" Because he just seems like he's a pretty decent guy who just has a busy life. Like,
Yeah, I mean it was fine. I mean it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't. I mean it could have been better. I think that's probably what you're arguing. And yeah, I could see it could have been better, but it was fine.
yeah,
Nothing like great, nothing like really I hated this movie. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. It was, yeah, it was somewhere in the middle.
yeah. So that's my mid list, and that's all of our mid lists here. So as you can see, those are some films that, you know, we had issues with, and we had some positive things to say about. So it's like it's almost as if somebody knew what they were doing, that these could have been much better movies that we ended up getting. But over the next couple of weeks, we'll have more time to talk about our best, excuse me, and worst lists. So next Saturday, which won't be tomorrow, obviously, but next Saturday we'll do episode 99, and that will be our best list of 2024. I got a lot of guests lined up that's going to be joining us here to talk about movies on Saturday. We'll be doing the show in the afternoon. I haven't slated an exact time yet. Once I have the full list later this week, I'll get you guys a time on when we're going to do that. But I heard everyone from Sarah's supposed to be joining us, Christian Toto, Chris Gore's joining us, Iron Oxide, Paulie wants to jump in on our show here, Culture Casino as well. So there'll be some big names joining us here on next Saturday for episode 99, and then in 2 weeks, episode 100, which will also be on Saturday. We'll be talking about all the bad, shitty movies that we watch, and there's a lot of bad, shitty movies that we watched here. So I'm pretty sure no one's gonna have a tough time putting it into top 10 for that one. So
Well, yeah, it's going to be tough leaving out some of the films.
yeah, and they're narrowing it down to 10 is probably going to be the toughest part. There's a lot of them, but that's what we're going to end up doing. So until then, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys sign off here with anything that you guys want to promote that you guys are working on. We'll start here with Rob, because I know that you're on the same coast as me. So it's like, yeah, we're breaking it down over here on a Friday night. So what do you got coming up?
Yeah, so I'm just finishing up 2024 movies I haven't seen. So I got that stupid Angelina Jolie movie on Netflix to watch. But I did like the Bob Dylan biopic. It's nothing special in terms of like movie wise, like you know what you're getting with a biopic of a musician. But I think Timothy Chalamet did a really great job. Whatever becoming Bob Dylan. So check that out if you're interested. Other than that, yeah, I'm just trying to get as many movies watched here before the end of the year as possible. It's been a relatively slow year. We still cracked 700 movies watched in the year, so still watching more than the average person, I guess. So And it's been a rough year, but I'm always optimistic, I guess, for what the future brings, even though the industry is shit right now. So, but yeah, that's about it. Just you can follow me on my Twitter as always, and that's about it.
All right, Rick, what you got coming up?
All right. Well, I've got I just published my review for the movie Queer. I've got upcoming reviews of Sonic the Hedgehog 3. I just uh, get my review for Speak No Evil, which I finally saw. Then I've got Nosferatu coming up, A Complete Unknown coming up. Still trying to finalize my worst stuff. My 10 best are pretty much set, so there's that. And yeah, just trying to finish more as many reviews as I also can. I mean, the movies as I can watch as well. So that's yeah, that's pretty much it. Just as always, more reviews and just my 10 worst list, which I'm still shifting around. My 10 best, most of that is pretty set. So the big question for everyone is, where will Argyle fall on my worst? That remains to be seen. We'll find out.
Well, I can let you know now that it wasn't even on my honorable mentions. That's how bad 2024 was as a year. So, yeah, you can't wait for my best and worst of the year. But yeah, those shows will be coming up. Our last two shows will be on Saturday. So next Saturday, so it'll be the 4th and the 11th when we do those two shows. Outside of that, I got right now I'm bounding in the comics. I have my best, worst, and mid already written. It's being edited, so it'll be uploaded soon. This weekend I'll be recording the audio version, which should be up on the YouTube in the next few days. So we'll have that put together as well. Sunday it'll be an episode of the Bible Lens. We're going to talk about what's going on in Syria right now and how that relates to Bible prophecy, talking about the nations of Turkey and Libya and Syria. A lot of crazy things happening right now. How close are we? We'll figure it out on Sunday night. Then we got the New Year's Eve episode of the Bar Room, which I kind of just broke down and like said, you know what, let's throw the format out the window and like just have a good time and reminisce about some old stuff. I'm debating whether to do that again for the New Year's Eve episode or go back to the old format. So once again, I'll let you guys know this week what I will decide. I'll let you guys know there. So till then, thank you all for joining us here. I know we had Chris, Maurice, Rooftop Korean, Kote was here tonight, DK, Doba Fett, all of us on our Rumble side, our YouTube side, and on our X side of things. But until then, we're going to sign off now. We will see you guys hopefully on Sunday, if not on Tuesday. If not, we'll see you Saturday on the big show. So until then, adios, goodbye, and good night. I have to figure out which outro I was going to do, because I didn't realize we got 2 outros now. So I'm going to do the short one. Good night.